Chapter 132. Lord, the people of the Linli building are coming. Just when Yan Shishuan and his daughter were staring at each other, a subordinate reported. Yan Shishuan immediately came to his sense and then said with a very solemn expression, Hongxiu. You stay. I also have an important task for you. After we leave, the defense of the satrap's mansion will be weak. You use the bow in your hand to protect the satrap's mansion and mother. Can you do it? Seeing Yan Shishuan's serious expression for the first time, Yan Hongxiu was immediately filled with a great sense of responsibility. She nodded happily and said, Dad, don't worry. I won't even let a mosquito into the satrap's mansion. Good. You deserve to be my good daughter. Yan Shishuan praised and immediately asked someone to take Yan Hongxiu to make arrangements. Yan Zai saw that his sister was cheated by his father to stay. He couldn't help crying and laughing. At this time, his father didn't forget to tease his sister. It was really, do you think I am joking? A serious voice suddenly came. Yan Zai's expression changed. He raised his head and wondered, isn't it? Yan Shishuan sighed softly and said with a complicated expression, it is an impossible promise to pull the bow. But she met Mr. Li and the impossible became possible. In this case, there is no reason for me to stop her. I will go back to persuade her mother. Yan Zai had goosebumps all over his body. He couldn't help but say excitedly, then Yan Shishuan smiled softly and didn't know what expression he had. He said, as for you. If you can pass this time safely, I won't stop you. But my Xiangong is a taboo. If you want to improve your cultivation, go to the Linli building, thank you, Dad. Yan Zai immediately knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Yan Shishuan shook his head. He didn't know whether his sudden decision was right or not. He once vowed that he would never get involved in the affairs of that circle again. But both of his children were eager to learn martial arts. In front of the gate of the satrap's mansion, Luo Chen stood in a group of elite soldiers and quietly waited for the arrival of Yan Shishuan. He looked around with a pair of bright eyes. He was familiar with many of these elite soldiers. Half a year ago, he was chased like a mouse. Haha, you must be the 4th Protector Chen that Mr. Li mentioned, right? What a young hero. Luo Chen looked up and saw Yan Shishuan in casual clothes coming over with a smile. Yan Shishuan looked friendly. He felt extremely dangerous from Luo Chen. Although they were both at the peak of the acquired realm, they were not at the same level. In other words, Yan Shishuan's potential had been exhausted, and he would be stuck at the peak of the Hotian realm for the rest of his life. However, the grim-faced youth in front of him had already reached the threshold of the peak of the Hotian realm. It seemed as if he only needed to pierce through a piece of paper to easily step into the Xiantian realm. Even the 4 protectors of the Linli building have such a cultivation. It's really horrible. How many young masters are there in the Linli building? Yan Shishuan was shocked and couldn't help but think so. But she didn't know that Luo Chen was the most powerful person in the entire Linli building except Su Li. Being praised by Yan Shishuan, Luo Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If he saw Yan Shishuan 2 months ago, he would definitely run away. But now, he was not nervous. Instead, he slightly cupped his hands and replied in a low voice, I'm flattered. Seeing that Luo Chen was not good with words, but was not so difficult to get along with, Yan Shishuan was relieved. He asked Luo Chen to wait for a while, and then he summoned all the elite soldiers. A group of hundreds of people quietly went out of the city from the secret passage to the ruined temple. In the blink of an eye, it was already dark. At the city gate, Su Li drove the carriage slowly away from the Qinghe town. When Ruomin looked at the carriage going away, she clenched her hands, and her palms could not stop sweating. Don't let anything happen. Su Li looked calm and lowered her head to touch the amulet on her chest. She had returned the amulet to Wen Ruomin after she came back. Now Wen Ruomin gave it to her again. Luo Chen, who was waiting outside the city gate, saw the carriage coming and immediately became spirited. Coming. On the way, he left Yan Shishuan's team. After familiarizing himself with the environment from the ruined temple to the Qinghe town gate, he came back and hid in the weeds beside the official road, quietly waiting for the female lecturer to appear. After all, his task was different from that of the government. He was mainly entrusted to protect others' safety. The carriage slowly approached. Luo Yichen looked tense and was about to follow it secretly. But when he saw the girl in the carriage, he suddenly stopped and fell into a dull look. Then he felt a deep pain in the balls and didn't know where to start. What the fuck, was actually Li. Since she was in the carriage, what was the use of squatting here for a long time like a fool? Don't give yourself away. I am the lecturer of the girls' school who needs to be protected. At this time, Su Li transmitted the sound in silence to him. Luo Yichen was stunned and his eyes were shining. He had no time to think too much and immediately followed her secretly. The ruined temple was built on the mountain, and the road was not very smooth. Su Li had to give up the carriage and walk to the back road. Under the cover of the night, the forest with mottled shadows was unspeakably gloomy and horrible. Looking at the timid fear on Su Li's face, Luo Yichen, who followed her secretly, was even more painful. Her acting skills were even more terrible than her cultivation. If he didn't know Su Li's other identity first, he couldn't believe that this seemingly weak girl turned out to be a temperamental witch. The hour gradually approached. After a seemingly difficult trek, Su Li finally arrived at the ruined temple. Squeak! The harsh sound of pushing the door came from Su Li's hand, which shocked the elite soldiers lurking around. After the door was opened, they didn't see a figure. The beggars who usually stayed here didn't know where they went. Su Li walked in with a frightened face and kept looking around, but she knew in her heart that there was no one here at all. Unless the person was beyond the inborn realm, he couldn't hide from her. Walking into the ruined temple, Su Li saw the strange red paper on the ground, which couldn't be more conspicuous. She immediately walked over and picked it up and opened it. You are really a smart and brave little girl. When you see this paper, it shows that you are still a little filial. If you want to save your father's family, come out of the ruined temple now. Don't talk to anyone. Get on the fast horse at the foot of the mountain in the north of the temple as fast as you can. It will take you to see me. If you dare to say a word, wait to collect your father's corpse. The law of the Dahan country won't care about your feelings. Su Li's eyes flashed after seeing it. She immediately ran down the north side of the cliff. Sure enough, she saw a lonely horse tied to a tree. This group of horses was very handsome. At first glance, she knew that they were extremely fast horses. Su Li did not hesitate to get on the horse. The horse seemed to be controlled by drugs. After Su Li sat on it, she immediately ran wildly and disappeared into the depths of the forest. Oh no! Yan Shishuan, who caught up with Su Li, suddenly changed his face when he saw Su Li ran away. At this time, Yan Zai hurried over with the red paper in his hand. Dad, look! Yan Shishuan took it and read it. He was angry inside. This silly girl. She is going to die in vain. She can't save her father at all. He wanted to seize this opportunity to catch Wu Yun. Although they would inevitably face the threat of the Gong family in the future, at least they could solve this crisis. But Wu Yun's cunning and ruthlessness were far beyond his calculation. By the way, where is Protector Qin? Yan Shishuan suddenly remembered. He turned around and looked around. It was quiet and there seemed to be no one around. Seeing this, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope in his heart. Protector Qin, it's up to you this time. On the mountain road, Luo Yichen silently followed the marks made by Su Li all the way. He cursed the horse in his heart. It had been running wildly for an hour. Even he couldn't bear it, let alone an ordinary horse. He didn't want to follow her. If Su Li couldn't beat the horse, he would just be a dead end. But before Su Li left, she transmitted the sound to him in silence and asked him to follow her secretly. He could only bitterly chase a horse and eat the dust. Su Li sat on the horse, and the scenery around her passed by at a very fast speed. At the same time, she also sensed that the breath of the horse under her was declining at a speed visible to the naked eye. This means... I didn't expect that Wu Yun had something to do with those rats. Su Li's eyes flashed with a glimmer of interest, and then she recovered her pale face in an instant. The horse was about to die. If there was no accident, they should arrive at their destination. Wheezing, wheezing, the horse panted violently, and its speed was getting slower and slower. Luo Yichen could hear it from a distance. He immediately became alert and lightened his steps. He poured the water in the depression beside the mountain on his body to cover the smell of sweat, and then quietly followed up. Plop! The horse under her fell to the ground, and Su Li staggered and was thrown out. She fell awkwardly beside a wooden house by a small river. The gravel on the ground rubbed her arms and made them bleed. Su Li bowed her head and cried out in pain. When she heard the sound of the wooden door opening, she suddenly looked at the wooden door uneasily like a frightened rabbit. Squeak! A short old man dressed in a gray robe slowly walked out of the door. His turbid pupils glowed with green light, which didn't look like a human's eyes. At this moment, he looked at Su Li as if he was looking at delicious food. Ha ha ha, you are really a good little girl. I know your meat is tender and delicious. The old man in a gray robe laughed gloomily with yellow teeth. Then Su Li saw that he took out a lump of black plaster from under his robe, and said impatiently, "Well done. The amount of this medicine is enough to poison all the people in the satrap's mansion. I can't wait to enjoy the sacrifice. Get out of here." Wu Yun was overjoyed when she heard the words. She immediately took the poison invitation respectfully, and the fear in her eyes increased. She stepped back again and again. "In this case, Master, I'm leaving." As she said, she carefully put away the poison and glanced at Su Li quite happily. Then she left along the night road without saying anything. She didn't want to stay here even for one more second. Only Su Li and the old man in a gray robe were left in the field. The old man in a gray robe was more excited. Looking at Su Li, who was kneeling on the ground like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, as if she was too scared to stand up straight, he happily took a bottle of bone-softening powder from the house. At the same time, he shook his left sleeve, revealing a shining claw blade instead of his hand. Hum hum, hum hum. Baby, don't be afraid, the old man in a gray robe came to Su Li and hummed. He pinched Su Li's mouth with his right hand and poured the bone-softening powder into her mouth. After Su Li ate the bone-softening powder, the old man in a gray robe was completely relaxed. But the claw blade in his left hand was aimed at the skin between Su Li's neck, and he was about to cut it. At this moment, a cold light flashed and instantly penetrated the old man's throat. Even Su Li's eyes were still full of fear, and there was no murderous intention. The old man in a gray robe was shocked. His hands trembled and he wanted to pull out the dagger in his neck, but he didn't dare to. He made a ho-ho sound in his throat, and his eyes were full of disbelief. He was actually plotted against by a young girl who had no strength to truss a chicken. It was too much. Su Li in front of him didn't have any fear and uneasiness at all. He even saw that she nimbly took out a dagger from nowhere and stabbed it into his heart. Although you may not be good at the tricks of the Lianxue cult, you still have to guard against them. Su Li spat out the bone-softening powder in her mouth and sneered. How do you know that I am? The old man in a gray robe widened his eyes and died before he finished his words. Su Li pulled out the dagger in the heart of the old man in a gray robe. Seeing the dark red blood with 60% gray flowing out, she slightly narrowed her eyes. She didn't expect that it was a big fish. According to the words of the Lianxue cult, the ability of the old man should be comparable to the inborn seventh hurdle. Unfortunately, he lost his vigilance in front of Su Li and died here without using 1% of his strength. Clatter! Luo Yichen, who was covered with dirty water, came out of the forest. When he saw the old man in a gray robe who had become a corpse on the ground, he breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but feel discouraged. As expected, with Su Li, he had no chance to fight at all. Only the one in his hand could be counted as a result. Chapter 133. Hearing the movement, Suli turned around and glanced at Luo Yichen. She gently wiped the blood on the two daggers on the chest of the old man in a gray robe and took them back. Luo Yichen put down Wu Yun and walked to Suli to look at the old man in a gray robe. But because of his limited knowledge, he didn't see anything. Did you see anyone else along the way? After dealing with the body of the old man in a gray robe, Suli turned around and asked. Seeing Suli's skillful and casual movements, Luo Yichen was slightly shocked and shook his head quickly. No. Suli's expression showed a touch of understanding, and she pondered a little more. She thought that Wu Yun was the initiator of stealing official silver in the Qinghe town. Now seeing the old man in a gray robe, she suddenly found that things were not as simple as she thought. It was very likely that Wu Yun was just a puppet and the blood refining hall was the real manipulator behind the scenes. Trouble. Suli frowned. She absolutely didn't want to see the forces of the martial arts circle so early. The Linli building was just starting out. It was like a baby who had just learned to crawl in front of the blood refining hall. Thinking of this, Suli got up and walked to the cabin. Although the old man in a gray robe set some small traps, it was not a problem for the experienced Suli. After searching the cabin carefully, Suli found no clues except a few secret letters between the old man in a gray robe and Wu Yun. Soon, the cabin was on fire. Suli held the torch and her eyes were shining. No one knew what she was thinking. Luo Yichen held Wu Yun under his armpit with one hand and stood aside. He wanted to urge Suli to leave immediately for several times, but he swallowed the words. Looking at the fire, it was not difficult for Suli to know that Yan Shushuan and others were coming. It would be too late if they didn't leave now. When she was thinking of this, suddenly there was a rustle in the forest. Two young figures came out. They were Chu Qingning and Fang Yuan. Seeing that Suli and Luo Yichen were safe and Wu Yun was caught, they were relieved. Have the marks along the way been destroyed? Suli suddenly asked, but Chu Qingning smiled and said, of course, we still have a little vigilance. Luo Yichen blushed and felt ashamed secretly. His family background determined that he could not be as careful as Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning. He never thought about the problem of marking on the road all the way. Fang Yuan, you and Chu Qingning leave secretly with Wu Yun. Don't disturb Yan Shushuan. Suli's expression was indifferent, but her tone was a little urgent. She pointed to another path that couldn't be walked by horses and signaled Fang Yuan and Bai Shishuang to leave quickly. Then she picked up the claw knife that hadn't been melted on the ground and pulled it fiercely to her left arm. Puchi. A bloody wound appeared on the outside of his right arm, extending from his wrist to his shoulder. It was deep and long. The sound of blood splattering caused the eyebrows of the three youths to twitch. They felt a chill in their hearts. Even if they were pretending to be injured, there was no need to be so ruthless, right? The wound was so big that one could almost peel off his skin. The severe pain stimulated Suli to frown slightly. Seeing that Fang Yuan and Suli didn't leave, she immediately raised her eyebrows and said with slight anger, "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Fang Yuan woke up immediately. He took Luo Yichen, Wu Yun and Chu Qingning and disappeared on the path. At the moment when he passed by Luo Yichen, his lips buzzed, but no sound came out. Take care of her. Suddenly receiving the sound transmitted by Fang Yuan, Luo Yichen was surprised and immediately laughed. It turned out that this blockhead was interested in Suli. Luo Yichen, carry me on your back to meet Yan Shushuan later and say this. Suli threw the claw knife into the sea of fire and destroyed it. Then she told Luo Yichen again. Then she swallowed a mass of white powder and fell into his arms in astonishment. No wonder you want me to carry her on my back. Luo Yichen was just wondering that Suli's right arm was injured and he only needed to hold her. Why was she so delicate that he had to carry her on his back? It turned out that she was going to swallow the bone-softening powder. Such a large amount was enough for ordinary people to sleep for a day and a night. Even a senior of the inborn realm would be powerless for a while. Was she really not afraid that he would take the opportunity to do something? Taking a deep breath, Luo Yichen did not forget to simply bandage Su Li's arm. Then he carried Su Li on his back and walked back. He whispered, "The situation forced me to do so." This is not a betrayal of Ruhan. Su Li lowered her head weakly, but there was a trace of a smile at the corner of her mouth. She did this to create the illusion that the death of the elder of the Lianshi cult had nothing to do with the Qinghe town. But she was also taking the opportunity to test Luo Yichen. Fortunately, Luo Yichen did not let her down. Luo Yichen carried Su Li on his back for a while. Finally, he saw the elite soldiers looking for them in the forest. He took the initiative to show up. The elite soldiers were overjoyed and immediately shouted, "Lord, come quickly. We found Miss Su Li." The transmission speed was very fast. In less than 5 minutes, Yan Shixuan appeared in front of Luo Yichen. Seeing the blood stains on the two people, his face suddenly changed. He stepped forward to check Su Li's breath. After knowing that the latter was still alive, he was relieved and quickly said, "Thank you for your help, Protector Chen. Don't hesitate. Send Su Li to be healed quickly. Let's talk about other things later." Luo Yichen nodded and said, "It's reasonable." After a busy night, in the satrap's mansion, the old doctor stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Workshop owner Su's injury this time is much lighter than last time. But she lost too much blood and a large dose of knockout drug in her body. So, she will not wake up for a while. But these are all trivial matters. I will prescribe a prescription to help workshop owner Su recover." Yan Shixuan was overjoyed when he heard that. He repeatedly held his hands and said, "Thank you for your hard work. This way, please." Yan Shixuan left with the doctor. Yan Hongxiu looked at Su Li, who was lying on the bed with her eyes closed and face pale. Her eyes were red. Last time, Su Li was injured for no reason because of the Jin family. This time, she was cut for helping them. What if there was a scar in such an obvious position in the future? After Yan Shixuan sent the doctor away, the smile on his face disappeared. He returned to a dignified expression and came to the front hall. Luo Yichen, who had been waiting here for a long time, immediately stood up and pretended to be concerned. "Is the miss okay?" Yan Shixuan smiled bitterly and said, "Protector Chen is as kind as Mr. Li. The miss is fine. Thank you for waiting for me for a long time. Now can you tell me what happened last night?" Luo Yichen felt strange when he was praised for being kind. But he still looked serious and followed Su Li's instructions. He said, "Last night, I felt something was wrong and tried my best to catch up with her. But I was still late." Yan Shixuan frowned more and more. In Luo Yichen's words, Su Li was a lamb at the mercy of others. He didn't know what kind of medicine she was fed. Her whole body was soft. And a black-robed man was cutting her arm slowly with a claw knife. Yan Shixuan immediately went to stop him, but he couldn't stop the black-robed man. Considering Su Li's injury, he went back directly. It could be said that except for saving Su Li, Luo Yichen didn't find anything helpful to the case. Yan Shixuan didn't doubt that Luo Yichen lied. Because the Linli building didn't need to hide any news. The Yan family and the Linli building were now in the same boat. Well, it's lucky that workshop owner Su can survive. Yan Shixuan smiled bitterly and said, "The Gong family deserves to be an aristocratic family in Yunjing. I admit defeat. Lord Yan, you don't need to belittle yourself." Luo Yichen's eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, "Although I can't see the background of the black-robed man who escaped, they are likely to come from the martial arts circle, not the subordinates of Madame Wu Yun. I'm afraid that my master can explain the specific speculation to you." Yan Shixuan's expression changed dramatically. He was shocked and said, "The power of the martial arts circle. How is it possible? How can the Yan family provoke such a giant?" Luo Yichen didn't say much. He stood up and cupped his fists and said, "I've said what I should say. If you want to know more, you might as well wait for Miss Su to wake up and bring her to the Linli building. My master can infer more things." Yan Shishuan came to his sense and quickly stood up to thank him. Protector Chen, it's really thanks to you this time. I can't thank you enough. After Suli wakes up, I will definitely visit her. After a night, Suli opened her eyes faintly, which made many people who cared about her feel relieved. Yan Shishuan hurried over and looked a little guilty and hesitant. He wanted to take Suli to the Linli building immediately. But when he saw Suli's tightly wrapped left arm, he felt embarrassed to say it. Suli showed a weak smile and said softly, Satrap Yan, you can say it directly. Although Suli was frightened this time, she was not seriously hurt. Hongxiu has just told me that the matter of the official silver has not been solved. If there is anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask. Yan Shishuan thought about it and turned his head to stare at Yan Hongxiu who was guarding the bed. Yan Hongxiu lowered her head aggrievedly. It was Suli who asked her. How could she not say it? It couldn't be hidden. Looking at Suli's pleading eyes, Yan Shishuan sighed and said, Suli, my Yan family is sorry to you and your Su family. You just woke up, but I have to take you to a place immediately. After 10 minutes, Suli stood in front of the Linli building with her left arm hanging. She felt a little strange in her heart. It was the first time for her to come here as Suli. Yin Shuedong, who had been waiting in front of the door, saw Yan Shishuan and Suli. She immediately stepped forward and bowed slightly. My master has been waiting for you on the top floor for a long time. Then, Yin Shuedong stepped aside and reached out her hand to lead the way. Yan Shishuan said, Thank you. Then he took Suli upstairs. When they came to the attic on the top floor, Yan Shishuan found that there was a thick gauze curtain in the open space in front of the desk. It was faintly seen that a woman was sitting inside. Two expressionless young men stood on both sides of the gauze curtain as if strangers were not allowed to enter. Lord Yan, I have been practicing martial arts to a critical point recently. It is not suitable for me to see others and affect my state of mind. If Protector Chen didn't say that, I would not force myself to come out. Let's talk like this today. The familiar voice came out from the gauze curtain. Yan Shishuan was relieved. It was taboo to ask others about their practice. He directly cupped his hands and said, I will comply with your request. But do you have any thoughts about what Protector Chen said last night? Ha ha ha. I just guessed it. But when I saw the girl's face, I was sure that it was those rats who did it. The laughter in the gauze curtain made Yan Shishuan's heart skip a beat. He asked in a deep voice, Who did it? Please tell me clearly. The girl's face is pale. It seems that she has lost too much blood. But if you look carefully, you can see that there is a blue color between her eyebrows and red hair on her temples. She has been fed the bone-softening powder. The bone-softening powder is not a common drug. It is effective even for the inborn realm. It is very valuable. There are few forces who can feed the bone-softening powder to a little girl regardless of the weight. With the analysis of the voice in the gauze curtain, the truth seemed to be peeled off and gradually became clear. Yan Shishuan's face became more and more ugly. At the same time, he faintly relaxed. Satrap Yan, is the wound on the girl's left arm very deep and long, and the wound is extremely smooth from top to bottom? Yan Shishuan immediately nodded and said, Mr. Li's description is extremely accurate. It seems that you saw it with your own eyes. Chu Qingning, who was standing beside the gauze curtain and disguised, couldn't help but secretly pout his mouth. He not only saw it with his own eyes, but also made the wound by himself. How could it not be accurate? That's right. Paralyze the whole body with the bone-softening powder and then peel off the skin and flesh to make the puppet of the living dead. This is the method of the Lianshi cult. The members of the Lianshi cult probably fancy the girl's appearance and want to make her into a puppet to keep them by their side to appreciate. The tone in the gauze curtain was light, but everyone present felt numb. Corpse Refinement Sect. Just by listening to it, one could tell that this sect was definitely not a righteous sect. The Lianshi cult, Yan Shishuan's face was ugly. He finally sighed and stood up. He held his hands and said, Wu Yun also disappeared. It is difficult to solve the problem of the official silver. Please tell me how to solve it. Ho ho. Chapter 134. Hearing Mr. Li's words, Yan Shushuan was tense for a moment and then relaxed. He said with a wry smile, "You are right. It is not the time to investigate my dereliction of duty. Today I will report the matter to the imperial court and wait for the punishment." Lord Yan, Su Li was moved. When she was about to say something, a voice came from the gauze tent, "Lord Yan, don't worry. The power of the Lianshi cult is beyond your imagination. As long as Su Li testifies, your Yan family will not be affected. However, it is hard to say what will happen to those families who have cooperated with the Lianshi cult. Thank you, Mr. Li." Yan Shushuan didn't show any optimism when he heard the words in the gauze tent. He just got up and cupped his hands. Then he left with Su Li in a hurry. After Su Li left, everyone was relaxed. Chu Qingning also took off the gauze tent. Fang Ling, who was wearing the clothes of Mr. Li, was sitting inside. She held a shell-like poisonous insect in her hand. She ran to Fang Yuan proudly and said, "Eldest brother. Did I act like her?" Fang Yuan smiled softly and shook his head helplessly. There was no need to act. Fang Ling just sat there and didn't move. But he still praised, "You are very good. My Ling is the best." Fang Ling immediately smiled happily. She carefully put the poisonous insect back into the brocade box on the desk and then went to work. "I didn't expect that Su Li has such a magical poisonous insect. I have been in the Nanjiang country for more than 10 years, but I have never seen it." Chu Qingning looked at the sound acquaintance and clicked his tongue in wonder. Fang Yuan was calm. He was not surprised by how many magical things the magical girl had. He just felt that he seemed to have seen this poisonous insect before, but he couldn't remember it. Maybe in a dream. Fang Yuan smiled and didn't think too much. Luo Yichen glanced at the two people who were still busy cleaning up and went downstairs to find Mei Ruhan. After he came back, the scene that Su Li cut herself with the claw knife without hesitation always appeared in his mind. There was no fear in her eyes. Luo Yichen couldn't help but tremble in his heart. She was as calm as eating and drinking. What a ruthless woman. No matter to the enemy or to herself. Ruhan is better. Su Li lived under the heavy protection of the Yen mansion for 7 days, and then she got the news from the imperial court. "Su Li, it's great. Not only did the imperial court not blame my father, but they also sent the chancellor of the Supreme Court to help solve the case. I heard that there were many masters accompanying him to deal with the Lianshi cult." Yan Hongxiu couldn't keep secrets. As soon as she heard it from Yan Zai, she immediately came to tell Su Li. Su Li was relieved when she heard the words. Even if she was 90% sure, there was still a 10% chance of an accident. Fortunately, she was not so unlucky this time. Yan Shushuan was also smart. He had blocked the news from the imperial court and turned a blind eye to the arrogant coercion of the Jin and Lin clans. He even pretended that nothing had happened when many of his properties were forcibly seized. The Jin family and the Lin family thought that the Yen family had completely admitted defeat, so they became even more arrogant. Although they could not contact Wu Yun all of a sudden, the Yen family's various cowardice showed signs of admitting defeat. After Su Li's arm got better, she left the Yen mansion and returned to the school. She was finally free and returned to the Linli building. In the underground adytum, Su Li looked at Wu Yun, who was muddle-headed and demented. Although Wu Yun was stubborn, few people could keep their secrets under the influence of her ecstasy poison. "We got the whereabouts of the official silver. But when we went to investigate, there was no one there. Obviously, the Lianshi cult noticed it." Fang Yuan added. Su Li nodded slightly and said, "It would be strange if they were still there. The official silver handed over to the imperial court every year is usually tens of millions of taels. With their connections in the martial arts circle, they can exchange it for a large number of practicing resources. It is impossible for them to let go. But how did they transport so much silver that night? Tens of millions of taels of silver are hundreds of thousands of kilograms. Fang Yuan frowned tightly. This was the only thing he couldn't figure out. Su Li smiled and said softly, a warrior in the inborn first hurdle can carry thousands of kilograms. Yesterday, the old man in the gray robe was in the inborn seventh hurdle and was proficient in the skill of corpse control. It was not difficult for him to carry things of hundreds of thousands of kilograms. Fang Yuan suddenly understood and was slightly shocked. The old man who was killed and destroyed by Su Li last night had such a horrible cultivation. What was Su Li's cultivation? Seeing that Fang Yuan was absent-minded, Su Li didn't expose him. She told him to take good care of Wu Yun and not to kill her. Then she returned to the school. Calculating the time, the people of the imperial court should arrive. There were many useless officers in the supreme judiciary, but there were also many real experts in solving cases. The official silver was stolen, so the people who came must not be too bad. With such thoughts, an inconspicuous carriage finally stopped at the door of the secret door of the Yen mansion. A middle-aged guard disguised as an ordinary groom opened the curtain, and a young man with an indifferent expression got off the carriage. The young man's face was not handsome, but very good-looking. Especially the pair of strange lavender eyes, from which the sharp and wise eyes seemed to be able to see through the stars and penetrate the starry sky. He was obviously a young man in his early 20s, but people felt that he was more like a wise old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. He exuded an unfathomable pneuma as high as the mountain and as deep as the sea. Behind the young man, another teenager came down. He also wore casual clothes. Although he looked handsome, his temperament was much more ordinary than that of the young man. However, he also had vitality and potential that the young man didn't have. This is the Qinghe provincial mansion. A faint light flashed in the young man's eyes, but there were infinite emotions in the teenager's eyes. He said, Qinghe provincial mansion, I am back again. The middle-aged guard took out a bundle from the carriage, and then the three people were secretly welcomed in by the satrap's mansion. Satrap Yen was full of anxiety and paced back and forth in the room. When he saw the housekeeper leading the three people in, he immediately greeted them and said to the middle-aged guard, Your Excellency, you come from afar. The situation is special. I can't let you come in from the front door. I'm sorry. The middle-aged guard looked cold and raised his eyebrows. He let the young man appear in front of Satrap Yen and said, Lord Yen, this is the imperial envoy from the Supreme Judiciary in Yunjing. There was a moment of silence, and the atmosphere was extremely embarrassing. The young man had a gentle smile on his face, and he was not angry at being recognized. He gently patted the folding fan in his hand, and said in a magnetic voice like spring breeze, Lord Yen, I am Ling Qinglan, the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. This time, I come to investigate the case of the theft of official silver. Please cooperate with me. When Yen Shixuan heard the name of the young man, he was shocked. He was happy and flattered and said, I don't dare. It turns out that you are the first young master in solving cases in Yunjing. With Milord taking action, we will definitely be able to recover the stolen official silver. Ling Qinglan kept smiling and said, It's hard to say. Your Excellency said in the book that some forces of the martial arts circle intervened. Cases with the intervention of the martial arts circle are very troublesome. Yen Shixuan smiled bitterly and inadvertently looked at the young man behind Ling Qinglan. He couldn't help but frown. Why did he look a little familiar? Noticing Yen Shixuan's gaze, Ling Qinglan pulled the young man out and said with a smile, I forgot to introduce him. He is the newly promoted officer of the Supreme Judiciary this year. He is from your Qinghe province. Yen Shixuan was shocked and looked at him carefully. The young man looked a little nervous, but he could still keep his composure. He raised his head and said, Lord Yen, long time no see. After a year, the young man's face matured a lot. He changed the hairstyle of the Supreme Judiciary and grew a lot taller. But Yen Shixuan still recognized him. He pointed at the young man with great shock and said, You are Su Qingtan. He recommended Su Qingtan to Yunjing personally. How could he forget him? But the time didn't match. Shouldn't Su Qingtan still be in the National Academy at this time? Su Qingtan smiled shyly and didn't explain. Ling Qinglan didn't give them time to continue to talk about the old days. He said with a smile, "It's not too late. How about taking us to see the injured female lecturer now?" "That's right." Seeing Ling Qinglan's resolute action, Yan Shixuan was not surprised but happy. He quickly arranged a carriage to go to the Qinghe girls' school. Su Li was still quietly reading in the courtyard of the school and recuperating. This time, her injury would be left to the Supreme Judiciary as evidence. So, since she was injured, she blocked the circulation of genuine energy in her left arm. Although her recovery speed was fast because of her physical body, it was still within the range of normal people. Wow, the forest was rustling. Su Li's ears moved, and her pupils suddenly contracted. She lifted her feet and looked down. She saw a carriage stopped in front of the courtyard. 3 people got off, but she could only sense 2 breaths. It meant that the cultivation of the other person was at least the same as hers. What was more exaggerated was that the youngest among the 3 people was the eldest brother. "This is Lecturer Su's courtyard." Yan Shixuan introduced with a smile and led Ling Qinglan and Su Qingtan in. Mammy Li greeted them and saluted quickly. Then she saw the teenager walking at the end. She suddenly widened her eyes and shouted, "First! First master!" "What?" Yan Shixuan was shocked by the sudden address. "What first master?" Su Qingtan was also shocked and said, "Mammy Li, why are you here? What happened to second sister?" At this moment, Su Li appeared at the door. She stared at Su Qingtan, who was no longer childish. Her tears rolled down unconsciously. "Second sister!" Su Qingtan exclaimed and couldn't help but hug Su Li tightly. He was silent for a long time. Seeing this scene, Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows, and Yan Shixuan was directly dumbfounded. He never thought that Su Qingtan and Su Li were from the same family. It was lucky that Su Li came from the Su family. How could there be a real dragon? But the fact slapped him hard. When he recommended Su Qingtan, he checked Su Qingtan's background. But he really didn't remember Su Qingtan's background because he was focused on whether Su Qingtan's background was clean or not. "Second sister, your hand. Was it hit by your mother again?" Su Qingtan's eyes were full of excitement. He was not as calm as before. The first time he saw his second sister was injured, which made him feel guilty. He once vowed that he would never let his second sister get hurt again. But in the past year, his second sister must have suffered a lot of grievances. "Don't worry. This time I will take you to Yunjing. I can protect you and won't let you be bullied again." "Eldest brother, I'm fine." Hearing the conversation between them, Ling Qinglan looked indifferent, but Yan Shixuan's face was a little dark. Su Li used to be beaten by her mother at home. Chapter 135. Eldest brother, it's really not what you think. I live a good life now. This was hurt by a thief. After Su Li explained, Su Qingtan stood aside in a daze. He didn't expect that not only he but also the second sister and the whole Su family had changed greatly after a year. Ling Qinglan didn't have time to pay attention to Su Qingtan and Yan Shixuan, who were in a daze. He gently untied the gauze wrapped around Su Li's left arm, revealing a long scab of blood. Su Qingtan was shocked. It was such a long and deep wound. How painful it must be. Su Li turned her head away and nibbled her lips. But she was thinking quickly. She was recalling whether there was any omission. At that time, although she scratched herself, she also paid attention to the direction of the hook. Even the coroner could not find any clue. But Ling Qinglan couldn't be underestimated. Such a young senior of the inborn realm, and his surname is Ling. Su Li recalled the seniors around him that Ling Li mentioned in the previous life. She matched them one by one and really found a role that matched the young man in front of her. He was the military counselor of the Imma cult. Like the head of the Shalu cult, he was the right-hand man of Child Li. People called him Qinghu. His name also had Qing. However, she still needed to test whether they were the same person or not. After all, Ling Qinglan was a member of the Supreme Judiciary. Su Li thought of Su Qingtan again, and her heart sank. After the eldest brother went to Yunjing, he was bound to be involved in disputes. But she didn't expect that Su Qingtan would get involved before she left Qinghe province. After the investigation, Ling Qinglan didn't say any conclusion. He left Su Qingtan and Yan Shishuan to continue the investigation. You are involved in the case. This time you come here to visit your relatives. You can't intervene. Hearing Ling Qinglan's order, Su Qingtan's eyes dimmed. This was the first case after he became the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. But the Su family was indeed involved in it. Even his father was locked in the prison of the satrap's mansion. It was really inappropriate for him to continue the investigation. It turns out that my father also changed your name. Su Li, it sounds much better than before. Yes, eldest brother. My family treats me very well. By the way, my mother also gave birth to the fifth sister. She is here. Mammy Li watched them talking and laughing outside the door. She couldn't help but secretly wipe her tears. It was great that the first master could come back. Although Miss had a lot of power in the dark, she couldn't use it in the open. She had to endure the bullying from First Madam and the others, but with young master around, things would be different. After chatting with Su Li for a long time and coaxing Su Li to sleep, Su Qingtan became serious. He went to the door and called Mammy Li to the room next door. Mammy Li, tell me how second sister has been living in the past year. Don't hide anything. Eldest young master, second miss has suffered too much this year. I almost died a few times. Mammy Li was on Su Li's side and immediately complained to Su Qingtan. Everything happened really. However, she also consciously concealed the other identity of Su Li and did not mention it at all. The more Su Qingtan listened, the gloomier his face became. Although Mammy Li's words were subjective, there were some things that didn't need to be investigated. She could know clearly by asking casually. Moreover, the second sister's status was not low now. There should be a file about her in the Tianya house. If she couldn't find it, she could buy it and read it. Bang! Su Qingtan heard Mammy Li said that ma'am. Su Chui and Zhu Yan united to slander Su Li. They almost sent Su Li to the government office and drowned her in a pig cage, but Su Huanli turned a blind eye. Su Qingtan hammered the table fiercely and his eyes were red. He didn't understand why his family targeted second sister like this and even wanted to kill her. Second sister was so kind and naive. Even if she was treated like this, she still cared about her family. She even risked her life to sound out the enemy for his father and almost died in the hands of the enemy. I was born in the Su family. They are the elders. I can't do anything, but since I am back. Su Qingtan's eyes flashed coldly, ma'am. Su Chui, Zhu Yan, Su Zipei, don't touch second sister. Ling Qinglan went out of the city to investigate the case alone. He quickly changed his clothes and appeared in the adytum of the Tianya house. The middle-aged guard was also beside him. After reading the files about Su Li, Ling Qinglan was lost in thought. Su Li's life experience was very clean. As for the suffering she suffered in the past and the reason why the Su family hated her, the reason was unclear. When Su Li was Su area, she was simply an insignificant person. It was not worth the manpower and material resources of the Tianya house to collect information. Since there is no problem with Su Li, it is not good news that there are people of the Lianshi cult in the Qinghe town. Ling Qinglan frowned. He took the robe handed over by the middle-aged guard and put it on. Although he was in the inborn realm, his body was not good. Ling Li spent countless treasures to reach the inborn realm in order to compete with the ice toxin in his body. However, the growth rate of the ice toxin was increasing every year. He didn't tell Ling Li this news. Maybe there was a price to pay for any talent in the world. He got a brain that even Ling Li couldn't compare with, but he paid for his health. Head, there were traitors in the Qinghe province before. Although they were cleaned up by the people of the Shalu cult, many files were lost. Some of them were about the stronghold of the Lianshi cult. I didn't do a good job. Please punish me. Looking at the middle-aged scholar who knelt on the ground and shivered, Ling Qinglan responded calmly. He said indifferently, go and accept the punishment. As for the level of punishment, it is up to you. After rebuking the head of the branch, Ling Qinglan was lost in meditation for a long time. The middle-aged guard gently put the files about the Qinghe town on the table. Then he went out and closed the curtain, leaving Ling Qinglan alone. Ahem, after a long time, there was a cough in the room. The middle-aged guard immediately rushed in with an elixir bottle nervously. But he saw Ling Qinglan holding a file and laughing wildly. The Linli building? There is a mysterious force in the Qinghe town that even the Tianye house can't investigate. Interesting, haha, interesting, ahem. Seeing Ling Qinglan coughed again, the middle-aged man immediately stepped forward and poured out a black elixir with a strong fragrance for him. Ling Qinglan took it and swallowed it. Then he stopped coughing. He shook his head angrily and said, "You are so sick. You are useless." The middle-aged guard shook his head silently. He remembered that his master vomited blood every day before he broke through the inborn hurdle and almost waited for death. But now his situation was much better. Let's go to the Linli building with me, Ling Qinglan said. He took off his thick robe, opened the door and went out. At this moment, in the Linli building, Su Li dressed as Mr. Li, and was lost in thought in the dark night. If Ling Qinglan was Qinghu, he would definitely be interested in the Linli building after visiting the Tianye house. She was waiting, and she knew it wouldn't be long. Even Su Qingtan couldn't violate the rules of the Qinghe girls' school. What's more, Su Qingtan was originally from the Qinghe school. He couldn't disgrace the school. Therefore, he moved out this afternoon. But he came to visit frequently. So, Su Li was free at night. Su Li, Ling Qinglan is here. Chu Qingning came up to report. Su Li nodded slightly. He immediately went to greet them. After a while, Ling Qinglan came to the attic and sat opposite to Su Li with a smile. He finally knew why the Tianye house couldn't find anything. Only the ordinary waiters didn't disguise themselves along the way. Those who had a profound breath had a thin layer of disguise on their faces. He could see it at a glance with his eyesight of the inborn realm. They all disguised themselves. It was impossible to find out their origins. What's more, it was a mystery whether the owner of the Linli building, Mr. Li, was a man or a woman. Although the Tianye house judged that the owner was a woman, he couldn't believe it. I'm Ling Qinglan, a junior. Nice to meet you, Mr. Li. Ling Qinglan's behavior was gentle and elegant. He always held the folding fan in his hand. He could be called a good child. Su Li smiled slightly. For the sake of caution, she manipulated sound acquaintance and replied, "Child Ling, you are too modest. If the most outstanding detective in the Supreme Judiciary is also a latecomer, I am afraid that no one in the world can be called outstanding." Ha ha ha, Mr. Li is really well informed. Ling Qinglan didn't panic at all when his identity was exposed. Instead, he said with a smile, "I heard that there is an excellent winery in the Qinghe town. After coming here and having a look, I really feel that it is very good." Although Ling Qinglan said those polite words, his heart slightly sank. The voice just now didn't seem to be a human's language. He couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman. It was not difficult for him to guess that the person in front of him must have used some means to communicate with others without making a sound. Tricky. Ling Qinglan felt that the person in front of him was tricky for the second time. The first time was when he met Ling Li. At that time, his health was too weak and he was not as calm as he was now. Mr. Li was really not easy to deal with. Thinking of this, Ling Qinglan continued to say, but don't you think that you have violated a taboo? Oh. What's the taboo? Su Li looked indifferent and said, Li is just taken from the name of the winery. It has no other meaning. Will it offend others? Ling Qinglan looked at Su Li, who was wearing a veil. He slightly grasped the edge of the chair with his fingers and leaned forward. He said in a low voice, Mr. Li reminds me of Child Li, the hierarch of the Yinma cult in Jianghu. Is it possible that Mr. Li has a secret relationship with that hierarch? Giggle. Su Li suddenly trembled with laughter. The weird and indescribable voice made people's hair stand on end. If so, it is really big news in the martial arts circle. Su Li replied in a low voice and then said with a smile, it's a pity. Child Ling should know whether I have a relationship with hierarch or not. Ling Qinglan's pupils immediately contracted for a moment, but his expression didn't change. He still said with a smile, what are you talking about, Mr. Li? Why don't I understand what you're saying? How can I touch such a high and mighty sect master? Child Ling Qinglan, you can't touch him. There is still Qinghu. Su Li's tone was cold. Ling Qinglan's heart contracted violently. Did she know his real identity or guessed it? Although Ling Qinglan tried his best to keep his expression unchanged and even his breathing normal, the shock of his state of mind still affected the only variable. Ahem. Chapter 136. The expression of the middle-aged guard beside Ling Qinglan changed slightly. He was about to take out the elixir from his arms, but Ling Qinglan grabbed his clothes from behind. The middle-aged guard knew what his master meant. Although he was extremely worried, he had to stop. He made a mistake. Ling Qinglan stopped coughing and calmed down. But his heart was cold. From the beginning of the quarrel, he knew that Ms. Li was absolutely not a stupid opponent like those before. His coughing just now must have let Ms. Li see something. Although I don't want to bother Ling Mo, I may let the Shaolu cult sound him out this time. Thinking of this, Su Li suddenly stood up and smiled apologetically. The joke is indeed too much. If Child Ling doesn't mind, please accept my apology gift. Ling Qinglan was slightly confused. Even as smart as he was, he didn't understand why Su Li was aggressive and forced him to a dead end, but she apologized and even offered a gift of apology in the next second. Child, please come with me. At this time, Su Li had already stood up to lead the way. Ling Qinglan was slightly shocked and alert, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he patted his folding fan and stood up. You don't have to apologize. But I'm interested to see what the gift is. Ms. Li, please lead the way. Su Li chuckled and went downstairs with Ling Qinglan. She was sure that the person was Qinghu. Although Ling Qinglan heard her words and disguised himself perfectly, and even his heartbeat didn't change, she was proficient in medicine and poison. That cough was enough to expose a lot. It turns out that Qinghu has a hidden disease. No wonder she died the earliest in the previous life. Su Li thought. She established the force to help him, but she could only be a spy. She couldn't do it openly. How to cure Ling Qinglan's injury without being noticed was still a problem. When she was thinking, they had come to the door of the adytum. Ling Qinglan narrowed his eyes slightly, but the middle-aged guard behind him had already stepped forward and stood in front of him. Su Li glanced back and said nothing. She opened the door of the adytum and walked in step by step. Ling Qinglan took a deep breath and started to follow her. The tunnel was very short and very quiet. There was no mechanism. Or, it didn't start. Ling Qinglan was slightly relieved. He was finally sure that at least now the Linli building was not hostile to the Yinma cult. Otherwise, if he went deep into the hinterland with only one guard, the Linli building would have 100 ways to kill him. Creak, Su Li opened a door and gestured to Ling Qinglan. She said softly, this is an apology gift. Child Ling, please. Ling Qinglan walked closer and saw the situation in the room. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. He said, Wu Yun. It's actually here. Child, you should know that Lord Yan asked the Linli building to protect the little girl secretly. In fact, Wu Yun was also there that day, and it seemed that she had a good relationship with the Lianshi cult. Speaking of which, the Gong family has a good status in Yunjing, right? Hearing Su Li's words, Ling Qinglan was slightly embarrassed. The influence of the Tianya house almost penetrated into the streets and alleys of Yunjing. They knew the details of every aristocratic family very well, but they didn't find the connection between the Gong family and the Lianshi cult. Clearly, this was not normal. Feeling the seriousness of the matter, the smile on Ling Qinglan's face disappeared. He slightly made a fist and palm salute to Su Li and said, "Thank you, Ms. Li. I will remember this big gift. Can I take Wu Yun away?" Su Li nodded slightly and said in a relaxed tone, "This is an apology gift for child Ling. Madame Gong is naturally at your disposal. But the Linli building also hopes that child Ling will not bite the hand that feeds you. The Linli family is small and just wants to sell wine peacefully. But we can't stand the destruction of the Shalu cult. If we can meet in Yunjing in the future, I hope that you can be lenient and give the Linli building a way out." Ling Qinglan was slightly shocked. He didn't nod or shake his head. He asked the middle-aged guard to carry Wu Yun. After saying goodbye, he walked out of the Linli building. The carriage left quickly. The Tianya house was on the first-class street, only 2 streets away from the Linli building. The middle-aged guard deliberately took a few circles. After confirming that no one followed him, he entered the Tianya house through the secret door. As soon as he got off the carriage, he didn't care about Wu Yun, and immediately took out the elixir. Ling Qinglan shook his head and asked the middle-aged guard to put away the elixir. Then he asked him to carry Wu Yun down. The middle-aged guard sighed and didn't disobey. He put away the elixir and carried Wu Yun. Every medicine had some poison. Moreover, the fire elixir was used to suppress the cold poison. It was originally the fire poison. He also knew that the more his master ate, the closer he was to death. He didn't want his master to eat too much. But when he saw his master cough, he was afraid that his master couldn't maintain the balance of ice and fire and would freeze to death. After locking Wu Yun up, Ling Qinglan didn't interrogate her. It was important to investigate the Lianshi cult, but the Linli building couldn't be underestimated. According to Mr. Li's tone, it was obvious that Mr. Li had confirmed his identity, and he even knew the relationship between the Yinma cult and the Shalu cult. He even suspected that Mr. Li was very clear about the relationship between the Tianya house and the Yinma cult, and he was very familiar with the way the Tianya house collected information. Otherwise, it was impossible that the Tianya house couldn't find out his origin. The only thing to be thankful for is that the Linli building showed kindness. Otherwise, my identity will be exposed. Ling Qinglan muttered to himself. Just thinking about it made him feel numb. According to Mr. Li's tone, he will go to Yunjing in the future. If he really wants to sell wine peacefully, he doesn't need to go to such a chaotic and dangerous place. After thinking for half a day, Ling Qinglan sighed. He couldn't distinguish whether the Linli building was a friend or an enemy. But since the arrangement of the Shalu cult was exposed, he naturally didn't dare to act rashly without Ling Mo's knowledge. Forget it. Let's solve the matter of the Lianshi cult first. How can we allow others to sleep? Ling Qinglan's eyes were as cold as a knife. He said, "Those demons and monsters are too greedy." On the other side, in the Linli building, people watched Su Li give Wu Yun to Ling Qinglan. Their reactions were different. "Su Li, are we reckless this time? We don't even know the details of Ling Qinglan, but we give Wu Yun to him. If Ling Qinglan has a relationship with the Lianshi cult, won't it be bad?" Chu Qingning looked worried, but his doubts were also the most concerned. Ordinary people couldn't enter Yunjing, and they didn't have any informants. How could they know the origin of Ling Qinglan? However, Fang Yuan thought that Su Li was likely to know Ling Qinglan, just like knowing Ling Li and Ling Mo. After all, they were all surnamed Ling. Ling Qinglan is indeed his man. There is no doubt. Su Li glanced at Fang Yuan as if she had seen through his mind. She said lightly. Fang Yuan's eyes twitched, but Chu Qingning and others were still confused and didn't respond. However, when Chu Qingning saw Fang Yuan's unhappy face, he suddenly reacted and laughed. What's wrong? I see. Ling Qinglan is the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. If he wants to enter that place, he must have a clean background. It's really amazing that he can arrange people in there. Yin Xuedong and others were confused, but Chu Qingning didn't explain who he was. It was okay to talk about Ling Li's identity in private. If he said it like this, it was hard to guarantee that someone would hear. He and Fang Yuan still had this self-awareness. Talk less about him in the future. Don't worry about the matter of the Lianshi cult. Try to stay away from it. Su Li looked indifferent. She turned around and left without any hesitation. Tut! Chu Qingning was speechless. No one knew what he was sighing about. Fang Yuan's face softened a lot, and there was a very faint smile on his face. For 3 days in a row, Su Li didn't go to the Linli building again. Instead, she stayed quietly in the courtyard of the school and enjoyed the meticulous care of her eldest brother, Su Qingtan. 3 days later, a large number of troops suddenly emerged in the Qinghe town and surrounded the Jin and Lin families. Jin Zhentian and Lin Xingrong were overjoyed. They thought that Yan Shixuan was forced to rebel, and they were about to use their private army. But when they saw that the leader of the army was not Yan Shixuan, but a young man in the black official uniform of the Supreme Court, their eyes widened, their hands and feet became cold, and they lost the power to resist. When did the people of the Supreme Judiciary arrive? They didn't receive any news. Seeing that the masters and lineal descendants of the two families were taken away, Yan Shixuan was instantly relaxed. The struggle that lasted for half a year finally came to an end. Looking at Ling Qinglan in front of him, who was in a black official uniform and looked serious, Yan Shixuan couldn't help but sigh. He tried his best but couldn't find any trace of Wu Yun. But Ling Qinglan just came to the Qinghe town for 2 days, and he caught Wu Yun from somewhere. His efficiency in solving the case was amazing. Ling Qinglan didn't know what method he used, but Wu Yun actually confessed what she had done. Even her relationship with the Jin and Lin families was clearly explained. Now the Jin and Lin families were completely unable to turn over the situation. They conspired to steal the official silver and colluded with the forces of the martial arts circle. The masters of the two families were bound to be beheaded. And the lineal descendants of the two families were also exiled. Lin Yanqing and Jin Rulan, who had a promising future, were completely reduced to stray dogs. Lin Xiang, who had just become Lin Yanqing's concubine, was even more dumbfounded. She was almost completely overwhelmed by regret and bitterness. She worked hard to get close to Lin Yanqing, but she ended up being exiled. If she behaved herself and was amiss at home, how could today's disaster happen? After this incident, Su Huanli was finally released. Although no one bullied him in prison, he was so scared that he lost a lot of weight. He was dispirited and listless. However, when he saw Su Qingtan in a black official uniform, he recovered quickly. He suddenly knew that the son of a high-ranking official in the capital city was more useful than any elixir. Su Qingtan, who knew what happened at home, didn't have a good face to Su Huanli. He just said a few words of concern and said nothing more. He said that he would go home to see his mother when he was free. He didn't even mention the names of Zhu Yan and Mam Su Chui. Su Huanli only thought that his son wanted to maintain his official prestige, so he agreed happily. He didn't realize that it was because of Su Li. After the Su family got rid of the suspicion, Su Qingtan thought that he could participate in the case soon. But Ling Qinglan didn't show up after waiting for a long time. He was confused and waited for 2 more days. Finally, he couldn't help but go to the Yan mansion. The satrap's mansion had specially set up a courtyard for Ling Qinglan to handle cases. Ling Qinglan's henchmen from Yunjing came in and out of the courtyard. Su Qingtan took a deep breath. He was also Ling Qinglan's henchman. On the surface, everyone knew that Ling Qinglan and the third prince were very close. But only his henchmen knew that Ling Qinglan seemed to be loyal to another mysterious force. But he was a newcomer, so he couldn't know more. In the National Academy where everyone had a backer, Su Qingtan was almost born in a poor family. Since ancient times, there was no noble son in a poor family, and he was no exception. Moreover, only after entering the National Academy, he knew that almost everyone who could be called the top talent in the National Academy was a martial arts genius. The Dahan country didn't have equal civil and military officials as the book said, but paid more attention to martial arts cultivation. As for him, in the National Academy, he could only be regarded as having a few skills. If Ling Qinglan didn't appreciate his character and accepted him in advance, he wouldn't have left the National Academy in advance and become the officer of the Supreme Judiciary with a bright future. At most, he would go back to the Qinghe town and be a useless low-ranking official. Chapter 137. Su Qingtan was nervous and slightly bowed his head. Do you want to ask why I don't take you to deal with the case when your Su family has been excluded? Did your performance disappoint me? Ling Qinglan smiled and glanced at Su Qingtan, who was speechless. He got up, picked up a file on the table and threw it to Su Qingtan. Look at this. Su Qingtan opened the file and glanced at it. His face immediately became gloomy. He finally knew why Ling Qinglan didn't find him. Because the Su family was still involved in the case. Su Huanli and his family came to the Qinghe town and secretly took orders from Wu Yun. The method of finding the official silver in the Baiwei building was ordered by Wu Yun. The person who did it was Su Huanli's first madam, who is also your first madam, Zhu Yan. Su Qingtan, your Su family has a lot to do with Wu Yun. How can I let you participate in the case? Ling Qinglan gently patted Su Qingtan's stiff shoulder and said with a smile, only you and I know the content of the file. Wu Yun is treacherous and cunning. It is inevitable that your family was instigated to make some mistakes. But the mistakes can be big or small. Su Qingtan, I leave the matter of your Su family to you. How about that? Su Qingtan's heart sank. After thinking for a moment, he clasped his hands and said respectfully, yes, sir. Ling Qinglan waved his hand indifferently and said, you can leave now. Do it as soon as possible. There are many cases in the capital city. There is no time to delay here. Su Qingtan nodded and left. He held the file in his hand, but it was very heavy as if he was holding a mountain. After he left, Ling Qinglan came to his sense and his eyes flashed with interest. Uncle Sean, what do you think he will choose? The middle-aged guard shook his head. He didn't know Su Qingtan. How could he know what he would do? Ling Qinglan patted his fan and sat down again. He said, I like Su Qingtan because he is righteous but not loyal. I can take this opportunity to test whether he is worthy to be trained as my successor. As for whether he was the successor of the Supreme Judiciary or Inma cult, no one knew. The middle-aged guard's expression changed slightly. Before he said anything, Ling Qinglan waved his hand and said casually, I know what you mean, but it's a pity. God doesn't give me face. I don't live as long as them. I've always liked to plan before I act, so it's better to prepare early for some things. Looking at Ling Qinglan's indifferent expression, the middle-aged guard felt sad. However, when Su Qingtan returned to his residence and looked at the files on the table, his eyes were full of struggle. Whether it was Su Zipei or Zhu Yan, he didn't have any burden to catch them. Their affection in the past had long been exhausted because they hurt Su Li again and again. If it weren't for the family relationship, he would even regard them as enemies. If his father and grandmother asked about it, this document would be enough. It was Su Li who really made him feel pressure. This girl was repeatedly abused by Zhu Yan and bullied by Su Zipei, but she never complained. In her heart, she still regarded the two dregs as her relatives. He also understood that just like his feelings for Li Yuelian, Zhu Yan was Su Li's biological mother. Blood was thicker than water, so it was impossible to erase it. If he caught Zhu Yan, would Su Li hate him for it? Su Qingtan's knuckles turned white, and blue veins appeared on his forehead because of excessive force. He was not afraid of anything. In Yunjing, he was in danger again and again, and he even bravely faced death. But now, he was very afraid, in the courtyard of the school. Su Li looked at the clean bluestone road outside. It seemed that the eldest brother would not come today. She opened the drawer, took out the AO sword skills from the secret compartment, and felt it carefully. Anyway, she had some achievements in the realm of swordsmanship in her previous life. She understood the first 3 hurdles of the AO sword skills without any difficulty. She even had a lot of insights, which loosened the bottleneck of Su Li's swordsmanship. But since she saw the 4th hurdle, Su Li seemed to become an idiot and couldn't understand a word. She clearly knew the words on the sword book, but she couldn't understand the meaning when they were put together. Su Li didn't think that it was her problem. Although she was not smart, she was not so stupid that she couldn't understand the book. There must be a mystery in the 4th hurdle of the AO sword skills, but she hadn't figured it out yet. In the previous life, Sword Lord Ho's practice was smooth, and he didn't have any bottleneck in swordsmanship. Why is it different for me? Su Li frowned secretly and felt a little annoyed. Although she was entangled with mundane affairs, she certainly understood that cultivation was the foundation. Except for the days when she dealt with special events, she didn't slack off for a day. She also used ordinary medicinal materials in the pharmacy to make a lot of mediocre auxiliary medicines to assist her practice. In just half a year, her cultivation had reached the peak of the inborn 3rd hurdle from the beginning of the inborn realm. She almost reached 1 realm in a month. Even Ling Li, who had reincarnated, couldn't compare with her cultivation speed, let alone other people in the martial arts circle. However, Su Li didn't mean to be complacent. She knew that there was always someone better than her. She even felt that her cultivation speed was slow and couldn't keep up with her plan. When the Linli building entered Yunjing, the inborn realm wouldn't be able to control it. So, she needed to step into a higher realm in a very short time. The framework of the Linli building is set up. It's time to order people to collect the news of the standard grade elixirs. Su Li's eyes flashed, and then she calmed down and immersed herself in the swordsmanship book again. This day was extremely quiet. Su Qingtan didn't pluck up the courage to come. In the next 2 days, there was no movement. Even Ling Qinglan, who had some confidence in him, gradually lost his smile. Could it be that this kid really burned the scroll? Thinking of this, Ling Qinglan finally received a servant's reply. Lord Su took people to a small inn. Clap. Ling Qinglan clapped his folding fan and smiled faintly. Don't disturb him. I'll go and have a look. At the same time, Su Li also received a message from Fang Yuan. She immediately figured out why Su Qingtan disappeared in the past 2 days. After thinking for a moment, she immediately dressed as Mr. Li, and rushed to Zhu Yan's residence. Zhu Yan still lived in the small inn that Su Li chose. Even if she got the news that the Jin family and the Lin family fell, she didn't want to slip away. Because she knew that she and Su Zipei couldn't escape at all. Su Zipei ate the lunch served by the waiter in a low voice. After the people of the Jin family and the Lin family were arrested, she was shocked and wanted to escape. But her mother didn't leave, so she didn't dare to run around. Without her mother around, it was even a problem for her to go back to the Desu town. Fortunately, there were no soldiers in the past 2 days, which calmed Su Zipei's uneasiness a little. Mother, don't you come over to eat? After eating, Su Zipei turned back and said to the inner room. There was no response. She cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks and was about to take them downstairs. Suddenly, she felt the floor was shaking like an earthquake. Before she responded, the door was pushed open. A large number of soldiers rushed in and surrounded them. The innkeeper was still wailing, "Officer, it has nothing to do with me. I really didn't know that they were fugitives. Otherwise, how could I let them stay in the inn?" Su Zipei's face was as pale as paper. She was stiff all over. It seemed that even her eyes were frozen and couldn't move. The soldiers really came. It's none of your business here. Go down. The innkeeper was so scared that he went downstairs as if he had been pardoned. Su Zipei heard such a familiar voice and immediately turned her eyes. She saw the teenager who was obviously different from the officers and soldiers. She was immediately overjoyed. Eldest brother. Mother, come out quickly. It's the eldest brother. The eldest brother is an officer. We are fine. Zhu Yan, who was full of despair in the inner room, suddenly heard these words. She ran out regardless of her messy hair. When she saw Su Qingtan in black with a serious face, she suddenly cried out, Qingtan, it's really you. Then, Zhu Yan directly rushed to Su Qingtan and hugged his waist tightly. She cried and said, I'm confused. This time, I'm really wrong. Qingtan, you are successful now. You can definitely save me, right? Su Zipei believed that Su Qingtan came to let them go this time. She pretended to stand behind her mother and said timidly, Eldest brother, you didn't tell me and my mother that you came back. My mother and I have been worried about you these days. The confidants who came with Su Qingtan were also uncertain at this moment. If the two people in front of them were really the relatives of Lord Su, why did Lord Su come here to shield them? He has just become the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. How dare he do this? It's nothing. I've seen it many times. In the entire Supreme Judiciary, only Lord Ling is very clean and fair. Lord Ling values him so much, but he dares to act recklessly, what a pity. Several young people whose cultivation exceeded the acquired 8th hurdle transmitted the sound to each other. They looked at Su Qingtan with contempt. At the same time, on the roof of the second floor of the restaurant diagonally opposite the inn, Ling Qinglan and Su Li stood opposite each other. The middle-aged guard was vigilant and looked at Su Li with horror. Before they came up, they didn't notice that there were people here. Ling Qinglan was slightly surprised and then said with a smile, Ms. Li, you are really well informed. So many elite soldiers of the Supreme Judiciary with extraordinary cultivation walk on the street. It's hard not to attract attention. Su Li seemed to explain. Then she pointed to the direction of the inn and handed out a pot of Liahua spirits. She said with a smile, the play in front of us is a good one. It's wonderful to be accompanied by this thing. Ling Qinglan was stunned at first. Then he took it and smelled it. He couldn't help but laugh and said, Ms. Li, you are really a sentimental person. The two people quieted down. The situation in the inn changed again. Su Qingtan's face was calm. Seeing the mother and the son acting, he didn't feel the slightest fluctuation in his heart. He even felt a little disgusted. He waved his hand, which was the gesture of capturing someone in the Supreme Judiciary. Several confidants who were transmitting the sound behind him immediately flashed different lights in their eyes. Then they instantly moved, pulled Zhu Yan away from Su Qingtan's waist, and pressed her firmly on the ground. Ah! Zhu Yan screamed. The person behind her was so strong that she almost thought that her arm was broken. How dare you! I am the aunt of your lord. How dare you treat me like this? Chapter 138. Su Qingtan asked someone to hold Su Zipei's hands, and then he took the file. In the surprised eyes of the elite soldiers behind him, he said loudly, the wife of the Su family, Madame Zhu, and the third daughter, Su Zipei. In the case of the theft of official silver, she helped Wu Yun, the culprit, to hide official silver in the Baiwei building, which caused Su Huanli to be imprisoned. After Wu Yun was brought to justice, she didn't repent and turned herself in. According to the law of the Dahan country, she should be arrested immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhu Yan immediately screamed, Su Qingtan, you can't do this to me. I'm your first mother. Do you want Su Li to have no mother? And your fifth sister, she was just born. Do you have the heart to do that? Su Qingtan looked colder and didn't waver. How dare you mention the fifth sister? After you gave birth to her, you treated her as garbage and let the second sister take care of her. I have lived for more than 10 years, but I have never seen a mother more vicious than the first mother. Eldest brother. Su Zipei struggled desperately on the ground and begged, I'm really wrong. For the sake that I just listened to my mother, please spare my life. I'm sorry for the second sister, but you can't take revenge to death. Su Zipei immediately misunderstood Su Qingtan's cold-blooded appearance. She thought that he took revenge on them because of Su Li. Seeing that Su Zipei was pressed to the ground and half of her face was stained with black mud, Su Qingtan didn't want to explain, but he didn't want Su Li to be disputed because of this. He immediately looked a little relaxed and said lightly, the Supreme Judiciary will deal with your crime impartially. You can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. As soon as Zhu Yan heard that she didn't have to die, she stopped trembling. Since she didn't have to die, what was she afraid of? As long as Su Zipei worked hard, she would still have hope. Thinking of this, Zhu Yan immediately pretended to be bitter and said sadly, Qingtan, your first mother is wrong and admits all the crimes. But your third sister is innocent. She didn't know who those people were. I asked her to lead the way. You can put her crime on me. Mother. Su Zipei's whole body trembled, and her expression changed. She had selfishly wanted to get away from the crime alone, but her mother took the blame on herself. Su Qingtan snorted and said, the Supreme Judiciary will decide whether he is guilty or not. Take him away. Ling Qinglan's henchmen looked at Su Qingtan with appreciation, and then they left with Su Qingtan and Ling Qinglan. People who liked to watch the fun had already gathered around. When they saw a large group of officers and soldiers coming out, they immediately pushed away to make a way for them. Who is that? He doesn't seem to be from Qinghe City. I don't know. Maybe he's a fugitive. Hearing the discussion, Su Zipei lowered her head. Her hair covered her blushing face. Her hands, which were cut behind her back, were clenched so tightly that they turned white. This moment was the most humiliating moment in her life, second to none. Even when he failed to make beggar's chicken in the Baiwei building, he was not as embarrassed as he was today. The only thing worth rejoicing was that they came from the Desa town, and people in the Qinghe town didn't know them. If their identities were recognized, it would be worse than death. Su Li watched the officers and soldiers leave. Then she looked at Ling Qinglan on the roof of the restaurant, who seemed to let down his guard and drank from time to time. She asked with a smile, Child Ling, how many points do you think Su Qingtan can get? She naturally knew that Ling Qinglan was deliberately testing Su Qingtan. Otherwise, there was no need to take so much trouble to bring people to observe secretly. Ling Qinglan smiled and said affirmatively, 5 points. The full score is 10. Originally, he could get 7 or 8 points. Unfortunately, the sentence, he can be exempted from the death penalty, made him lose 3 points. What a pity. Such a low score. It seems that you don't like him. How about giving him to the Linli building? Su Li's eyes were bright, and her tone was serious. Ling Qinglan was stunned at first, and then he smiled and said, Mr. Li, don't worry. I just said half of my words. Although the full score is 10, I appreciate 5 points. If he can be really cold-hearted, I really don't dare to use him. I see. Su Li said indifferently, a gentleman doesn't snatch what others like. Although I am not a woman, I can't compete with you. But, do you really know the weakness of child Su? Of course, his weakness is not the Su family. Ling Qinglan's expression was as if the question was too simple. He said, Su Qingtan is young after all. He exposed his weakness from the beginning. If he can go to the courtyard of the school less, I may give him the best 6 points. Su Li squinted her eyes and said, Child Qing, you deserve to be the think tank of a sect. But you have taken my wine. Aren't you afraid that I will poison it? The middle-aged guard's eyes were cold, and he was instantly in a state of hostility. Ling Qinglan's right hand trembled slightly, and then he quickly calmed down. He shook the flagon in his hand and looked relaxed. He said, I believe that the person who can make such a good wine is certainly reluctant to poison it. Am I right? That's not necessarily true. Su Li jumped out of the restaurant and turned into a wisp of smoke and went away from the top of the building. She said, a flagon of wine costs 100,000 taels. Child, remember to pay the bill. Ling Qinglan was stunned again, and then he laughed more happily. But he didn't know when his back was completely soaked. It was the 15th of May. It was not a special day, but it was the day when the families of the officials of the Jin family and the Lin family were exiled. Early in the morning, the gate of the prison was crowded with people who came to watch the fun. If there were no officers and soldiers to maintain the order, it would have been crowded. As a victim of the case, Su Li was naturally invited by Yan Shixuan to watch from the attic with the best view. When she came over, there were 5 or 6 people in the attic. Ling Qinglan stood in the front, and then Yan Shixuan. Workshop owner Su, I haven't seen you for a long time. How are you? Seeing Su Li coming, Yan Shixuan hurriedly greeted her. The Yan family would dominate the Qinghe town in the future. Now he was in high spirits because of the happy event. His whole spirit was different. Thank you for your concern, Lord Yan. I have been accompanied by you these days. My injury is not a problem now. Su Li smiled and shook her left hand. But Su Qingtan stepped over and stopped her. He blamed her, your injury still needs to be nursed. Don't move. The weather is getting hot. Remember to ask Mammy Li to change the gauze frequently. Got it, eldest brother. Su Li stuck out her tongue. Yan Shixuan smiled happily. Finally, there was a Su family who regarded Su Li as a treasure. Otherwise, this girl's life would be too bitter. Seeing Su Li coming, Ling Qinglan nodded with a faint smile. He didn't care about Su Li for the time being. If it weren't for Su Qingtan, he wouldn't even pay attention to her. Boom, at this time, the gate of the prison was finally slowly pushed open by the officers and soldiers. A large group of prisoners in dirty white prison uniforms with handcuffs and fetters were driven out by a group of jailers. All of them had disheveled hair and looked frightened. Some of them didn't do anything wrong. But since they were born in the Jin family and the Lin family, they couldn't escape this disaster. The masters of the Jin family and the Lin family made a wrong decision. The people of the Jin family looked at the bright sun and sighed. Even if the first master could come back, they couldn't see him in this life. They only hoped that the first master could come back to avenge them. Nothing else mattered. Madame Lin didn't have time to care about her own safety. She held her son at this moment and said with red eyes, Son, it's all my and your father's fault. It seemed that Lin Yanqing didn't hear his mother's words. His shoulders were covered with blood and the chains rattled. Cultivators who were exiled had to suffer the punishment of bone piercing. The 2 chains had just been planted and dragged on the ground. Every step he took, Lin Yanqing trembled with pain and felt that he was better off dead than alive. His eyes were red. He looked at the people around him who were pointing at him and smiled bitterly. Who could imagine that he, who held a small banquet in the Qinghe school and enjoyed great fame, became a useless person who was exiled today? Suddenly, he saw a tall tower. He stared at the few people who looked like gods under the illumination of the tower. Yan Shixuan, just you wait. I will pay you back 100 times for the shame you brought me today. Ling Qinglan touched his chin with interest. The teenager's eyes were interesting. Unfortunately, he was not smart. He showed hatred at this time. He glanced at Yan Shixuan secretly. As expected, he saw the killing intent flashed in Yan Shixuan's eyes. He was really reckless. Su Qingtan shook his head. If he were Lin Yanqing, he would keep a low profile at this moment and wait patiently for the soldiers to lose their vigilance. Then he would escape. Of course, he would not end up as miserable as Lin Yanqing. The road was very long. The Jin family and the Lin family passed through the streets of the Qinghe town like a parade and then went out of the city gate. Some people who threw rotten eggs, leftovers and even stones stopped and dispersed. When the parade passed through the gate of the Linli building, Luo Yichen saw it. Looking at Lin Yanqing, who seemed to be crazy every step of the prisoners, Luo Yichen was tense and breathed slightly. He seemed to see himself in those years. Mei Ruhan grasped Luo Yichen's hands tightly and looked worried. Luo Yichen felt the warmth from the former and finally relaxed. Then his gentle eyes fell directly on the former's face. Fortunately, the 5 years of hellish days had passed, and the heavens compensated him with a fairy, so it wasn't a loss. Su Li didn't look at Lin Yanqing, but looked at Lin Xiang, who mixed in the parade. The package of aphrodisiac was still in the underground adytum of the Linli building. After analysis, she also figured out the origin of the aphrodisiac. It was related to a sect in the martial arts circle. Since it was a cooked duck, she couldn't let it fly. The exiled prisoners left. Only the masters of the Jin family and the Lin family were left in the death cell. They would be beheaded later. Ling Qinglan took people back to Yunjing, but let Su Qingtan stay to deal with the affairs of the Su family. He also left a small number of people to Su Qingtan. The Supreme Judiciary was one of the most violent institutions in the Dahan country. Every officer of the Supreme Judiciary had the same status as any official of the Imperial Court in the 4th grade. Su Qingtan had this status, so he naturally had the qualification to settle down in Yunjing. Ling Qinglan once asked Su Qingtan to make a choice. In order to take care of Su Li, Su Qingtan finally chose to move his family to Yunjing. Su Huanli and others were naturally overjoyed when they heard the news. It was a great thing that they moved from the remote Desu town to a family in Yunjing. Su Huanli didn't have time to visit Zhu Yan and Su Zipei, who were still imprisoned in the prison. He directly took a carriage to go back to the Baiwei building in the Desu town. Even the newly opened Baiwei building in the Qinghe town also put up a sign of selling land. Everything would start from the beginning when he went to Yunjing. Because Zhu Yan was directly involved in the official silver, she couldn't escape the responsibility. Ling Qinglan gave the disposal power to Yan Shixuan. For the sake of Su Li and Su Qingtan, Yan Shixuan chose the lightest punishment, which was 20 strokes of the stick. Su Zipei's punishment was lighter. She only needed to be beaten 10 strokes of the stick. Even so, Zhu Yan's buttocks were beaten badly. She could only lie on the bed and couldn't get out of bed for half a year. Su Zipei also lay on the bed like her mother. But her injury would be completely healed in half a month. Looking at Su Li, who was taking care of her mother and her, Su Zipei turned her head. Her eyes were full of resentment. Chapter 139. Su Li took care of Zhu Yan for half a month. Every day, Zhu Yan looked at her as if she was an enemy without any complaint. Su Qingtan couldn't stand it. When Su Zipei's injury was almost healed, he immediately asked Su Zipei to take over Su Li's position and let Su Li go back to the school to have a good rest. I didn't eat the food you served. I'd better go back and have a rest. Su Qingtan looked at Su Li, who was pale because of lack of rest these days. He couldn't help but feel distressed. He hated Zhu Yan and Su Zipei more. If he didn't have to take care of Su Li with the excuse of moving the whole family, how could he let Zhu Yan go to the capital with them? Eldest brother, I'm fine. Don't blame me. I'm going back. Su Li forced a smile and turned away. After she disappeared in the gatehouse, Su Qingtan snorted and said to Su Zipei, who was back to him, "Don't think that I don't know what you and your daughter have done in the past 6 months. If Su Li didn't care about the old affection, I wouldn't care about family affection at all. You, take care of yourselves." Hearing the footsteps behind her leaving, Su Zipei's body was slightly stiff. Her nails pinched the wet cloth in her hand and her face showed a ferocious and unreconciled expression. Eldest brother. I am the daughter of the Su family. Su Li is just a bastard. Why do you spoil her but don't even look at me? She took a wet cloth to wipe Zhu Yan's forehead. Her lips trembled and she whispered, "Mother, Zipei doesn't belong to the Su family anymore. Su Li didn't go back to the school. Instead, she went to the mansion of the Jin family, today's Li Mansion. After overthrowing the Jin family and the Lin family, Yan Shixuan kept his promise. He not only transferred all the land deeds of the Jin family to the Linli building, but also returned double the silver. The savings of the Linli building suddenly expanded unprecedentedly. The future income was not only from selling wine, but also from the rent of several streets. Of course, compared with these, Yan Shixuan got much more benefits. He knew that he could make a fortune in silence, so he didn't make it public and didn't act recklessly. In the Qinghe town without the Jin family and the Lin family, the distribution of forces seemed to be clear. On the surface, Yan Shixuan's family was the most powerful one, but only he knew that the Yan family and the Linli building were equally matched. Even the Yan family had to rely on the Linli building for many things. Yan Shixuan had always politely declined and feared the forces of the martial arts circle. But the appearance of the Linli building broke his rules. On the surface, it was just a winery. It didn't seem to violate the rules that the forces of the martial arts circle entered the secular world. The owner of the Linli building was also very kind. He was not as cruel and merciless as people in the martial arts circle who regarded people as non-entities. It could be said that the latter reason was the reason why Yan Shixuan didn't reject the Linli building. If the Linli building was the same as the force he used to be, he would have reported the existence of the Linli building to the imperial court and tried his best to eradicate it. Su Li, everything is packed. We can set off at any time. Yin Xuedong came in from outside and looked worried. She said, but Yunjing is under the rule of the emperor. Ordinary people can't go there. What's more, we are. Chu Qingning scratched his head and looked at Su Li. With their identities, it would be a great thing if they were not arrested, not to mention entering Yunjing. How could they sneak into the city to open a winery? Su Li glanced at him and didn't answer. Instead, she asked, how about your discussion? How many of you stay and how many of you go with me? The forces of the Qinghe town had been stabilized. This was the base camp of the Linli building. Su Li must leave most of the people to develop the foundation and only take a few people to Yunjing. As for the candidates to go to Yunjing, she let Fang Yuan and others discuss it by themselves. As soon as she finished speaking, Fang Yuan stood up and said, I will go with you. Xiaoling and Xiaomu will stay to help. I will stay too. Luo Yichen stood up and stared at Su Li's calm face. He said, unless Ruhan also goes. He knew that Su Li hadn't told Mei Ruhan her true identity, and the Mei family wouldn't allow Mei Ruhan to go to Yunjing with a group of unknown people. In this way, he could only stay. Su Li nodded slightly, and coldness flashed in her eyes. She said in a cold voice, Luo Yichen, I don't restrict your freedom, but it doesn't mean that you can disobey my orders. You have to remember that you are working for the Linli building. Even if I want you to die, you have to do it obediently. Do you know that? Luo Yichen held his breath, and anger flashed in his eyes. But when he thought that Mei Ruhan was still here, he had to lower his voice and nod to show that he understood. It's good that you understand. The safety of the Linli building in the Qinghe town is entrusted to you. You and Fang Mu are responsible for the training of new members in the secluded site. If there is any mistake, I will hold you responsible. Luo Yichen was stunned. He thought that Su Li said so to let him go to Yunjing with her. He didn't expect that it was just a simple warning. Moreover, she was bold enough to directly hand over the Linli building in the Qinghe town to him. Wasn't she afraid that he would destroy the foundation of the Linli building? What? Are you not satisfied with me? Su Li raised her eyebrows and said in a teasing tone. Luo Yichen's face darkened. He knew that Su Li's words were not even a warning, but an extremely sinister prank. Although I don't trust you, I believe that you care about Mei Ruhan. Su Li pointed at the position of Luo Yichen's heart and said in a feminine tone, even if it is the future of you and Mei Ruhan, you have to perform well. Otherwise, your Luo family will not allow you to marry a common woman. Luo Yichen's heart shrank fiercely, and his expression changed slightly. What did she know? There were thousands of Luo families in the Zhu Shou country. How did she know which Luo family he came from? Just thinking about it, Luo Yichen suddenly felt that his chest was patted gently. Immediately, there was a thin piece of paper in his hand, which was written AO sword skills. Even if you are over the age, you should at least be a young master. Don't let me down, Su Li said. Then she waved to Fang Yuan, Chu Qingning and Yin Xuedong, and left the attic first. Chu Qingning clicked his tongue and patted Luo Yichen, who was still in a daze. He said, since Su Li can give this to you, at least she completely trusts you for the time being. You have to perform well and break through the inborn realm as soon as possible. Yin Xuedong covered her mouth and chuckled. Then she followed Chu Qingning to leave. Fang Yuan walked at the end and unexpectedly stopped. He said quite seriously, the Qinghe town needs a master of the inborn realm. The foundation of the Linli building should be guarded well. When everyone left, Luo Yichen looked at Fang Yuan's back and then lowered his head to look at AO sword skills. Finally, he couldn't help but swallow hard. The swordsmanship classic can help break through the inborn realm. Su Li should have this kind of thing. Even the Luo family didn't have this kind of thing, which was comparable to the sacred canon. But Su Li just helped him a little bit, and he got it. At this moment, Luo Yichen's inner thoughts suddenly showed signs of changing. When Fang Yuan and the other two people followed Su Li to the underground adytum, they were all confused. They didn't know what Su Li would say. Su Li turned her hand and took out a wooden token. She put it in Fang Yuan's hand and said in a low voice, use this to enter Yunjing under the cover of the Tianye house. It is not a big problem. This token was left to Su Li by Ling Li at that time. Fang Yuan's expression changed slightly. Even if he was very reluctant, he could only nod because it was Su Li's order. I didn't expect that Su Qingtan would come back in advance. My original plan was to let you sneak into Yunjing as servants of the Su family. Unfortunately, it is too late. Su Li sighed softly and took a pink package from the table and put it in front of everyone. In addition to entering Yunjing, there is one more thing to finish. In the Linli building, Yin Xuedong's intelligence was second only to Su Li's. She immediately recognized that this was the aphrodisiac that Luo Yichen bought from the black market in the town, and it was made by Lin Xiang herself. Lin Xiang has been exiled now. Do we have to rescue her? Yin Xuedong didn't know the grievances between Lin Xiang and Su Li, so he couldn't help but ask. Su Li's eyes flashed and she said with a smile, rescue her? No, we have to nip her future in the cradle, or there will be trouble. If the elders in your family are well informed enough, they should know that there is a hidden sect in the martial arts circle in Nanjiang country, called the Hehuan sect. The three people heard it, but they were all at a loss. They had never heard of it. Seeing this scene, Su Li couldn't help but laugh. Even in the martial arts circle, the Hehuan sect was also a sect with a grade. Although it was the lowest grade 9, it was not known by ordinary forces. What's more, standing in front of her now was not the head of a family, but a lineal disciple. In short, you just need to know that the aphrodisiac in Lin Xiang's hands comes from the Hehuan sect. I don't know why the Hehuan sect will leak the formula. But once they know that there is such a girl in the secular world who can make it, what do you think they will do? Su Li asked. Chu Qingning immediately patted his thigh and said, it turns out that Ru Chu Lin Xiang will probably be accepted by the Hehuan sect. If she hates the Qinghe town, it will be a trouble in the future. You want us to kill Lin Xiang to avoid future troubles, am I right? Su Li smiled and looked at Yin Xuedong. Yin Xuedong frowned. Since Su Li asked, her intuition told her that the answer would not be so simple. You do it for these obscene prescriptions? Fang Yuan suddenly frowned and asked, but if we get the prescriptions, where will we use them? He didn't believe that Su Li would do business with obscene prescriptions. Not only him, but also Chu Qingning and others would not be able to stand it. Su Li sat down and poured herself a cup of tea. She looked a little lazy. You are still too young. The three people heard it and raised their eyebrows. You're obviously the youngest one in the room. Suli glanced at the three people who were angry and explained with a smile, the people of the Hehuan sect never believe outsiders. Even if they can investigate Lin Xiang's background, they will feel troublesome. If they find Lin Xiang, they will only kill her to avoid future troubles. What the three of you have to do is to ask the whereabouts of the formula before they find Lin Xiang. Suli really did it for the formula, which made Fang Yuan's heart sink. I don't get the formula for business. Although the business of aphrodisiac has always been profitable. Suli shook the teacup, and a trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. She said, I just want to let those bitches of the Hehuan sect have a taste of being framed. Do they feel good or not? The three people were relieved, and then they couldn't help but wonder how Suli had contact with the Hehuan sect. There were even grievances. She had never been out of the Dahan country. Chapter 140. In the courtyard of the school, Mammy Li was busy packing. Almost all of Su Li's personal property was here. She was driven out by Mam Su Chui very early, so the Su family in the Desu town had nothing. Second sister, have you finished packing? We will set off in 2 days. Su Qingtan's gentle and clear voice came from outside the courtyard. Su Li looked up and saw Su Qingtan was tall and dressed in a light and elegant brocade robe. His long black hair reached his back and there was only a wooden hairpin in his hair bun. When he bent over and passed through the courtyard gate, his long hair immediately slipped to his chest. Seeing Su Li holding a scroll on the second floor, Su Qingtan smiled and showed a row of white and neat teeth. Only in front of the second sister could he show such a bright smile without scruples. It was impossible for others, even for his mother. Second brother. Su Li bounced downstairs, and the breeze blew her long hair behind her back. She had the unique intelligence and gentleness of a young girl, which melted Su Qingtan's heart. After suffering, his second sister could still maintain such a pure mind. It was really the most precious treasure in his life to have such a younger sister. Mammy Li is busy. Su Li looked at her eldest brother who was half a head taller than her. She was very calm. Her innocence had long disappeared with all the things in her previous life. She always kept vigilance in the face of the Su family, Qi Xianqing, Wen Ruomin, Yan Shixuan and other people who were kind to her. The vigilance had been engraved in her bones. But in front of the eldest brother, she was absolutely not pretending. She was really at ease and happy from the heart. Although the eldest brother had a relationship with the Yinma cult, in this life, the eldest brother could become famous at a young age and get the official position of the 4th grade. It was really great that he could live up to his talent. Well, you have a lot of time after you go to Yunjing. Can you spare some time for me? Suddenly, a familiar and strange voice came from the door. Su Li was slightly shocked. She knew the identity of the person. But she didn't expect that he came back at this time. Su Qingtan protected Su Li and suddenly looked back. He was stunned and said, Dr. Qi. Why are you? Although Qi Xianqing was not dirty and messy, he was absolutely not clean. With Su Li's eyesight, she could see at a glance that the old guy hadn't taken a bath for at least 2 months. Qi Xianqing came over and patted Su Qingtan's shoulder with appreciation. You didn't let me down. Now that you've become a member of the Supreme Court, it's enough to protect your sister. But remember, don't be arrogant and complacent. There are even more muddy waters in the world, which Qinghe City cannot compare to. Su Qingtan's eyesight was much better than before. Now when he saw Qi Xianqing, he felt that he was back to the National Academy and faced the great scholar like the headmaster. Also, he felt that he was in the Yunjing horse farm and faced the powerful general. Mr. Qi, what are you? Su Qingtan wanted to ask, but Qi Xianqing waved his hand to stop him. He said, I am just a villager. It is good that you want to take this girl to Yunjing. But your second sister is the most talented girl in the Qinghe town. She can't be neglected. Qi Xianqing said. Sir, Su Qingtan was helpless. He also knew that. But there was no such thing as a win-win situation in the world. If he had a way to let Su Li enter the National Academy in Yunjing, he would have arranged it. Unfortunately, what was the National Academy? He didn't have that kind of power. Of course, I know that you can't do it. I will arrange it. You can leave first. I will talk with this girl alone. Qi Xianqing angrily drove Su Qingtan out of the yard. If he didn't come back late this time, there would be a lot of trouble. There were too many spies in Yunjing. He didn't want to expose his whereabouts so early. Bang! Su Qingtan went out of the yard in a hurry. Before he turned around and said a word, the door was closed with a bang. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. After closing the door, Qi Xianqing looked at Su Li, who was standing in the yard with a happy face. He was instantly angry and said, "You are so reckless. Why don't you think about your life? Tell me, how many times did you almost die when I was away? I didn't teach you to practice martial arts for fun." Looking at Qi Xianqing's angry face, Su Li held back the impulse to laugh. She lowered her head and said with grievance, "But I can't beat them, Qi Xianqing patted his head. He was confused because of anger. Su Li couldn't beat Jin Cheng, Ao, or the bastards of the Lianshi cult. Let me see if you have slacked off in practice during this time. Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing waved his hand. Su Li's eyes flashed with slyness. Her feet flashed, and a pink fist came to Qi Xianqing in the blink of an eye. Bang! Touching his sore eyes, Qi Xianqing was a little confused. He was beaten by his apprentice because of carelessness. Was it because he was too tired to run around these days? No. Qi Xianqing thought of something and suddenly became excited. He grabbed Su Li's wrist. Su Li immediately felt a homologous genuine energy flowing into her tendons and vessels. But compared with the black genuine energy she cultivated, this genuine energy was not pure enough. Su Li knew that this was because Qi Xianqing only had half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction. It turns out that this old guy has been stuck in the inborn peak. Unfortunately, it is too difficult to break through that level in the secular world. Thinking of this, Su Li slightly converged her pubic region and only revealed the cultivation of the acquired eighth hurdle. But even so, Qi Xianqing was still completely shocked. This girl. In just half a year, she jumped from the acquired third hurdle to the acquired eighth hurdle. He remembered that when his master taught him to practice, he praised that he had reached the acquired eighth hurdle at the age of 18. It was a superior talent. Although he didn't have the appearance of a young master, it was enough to disdain warriors of the same age, which made his master feel inferior. But this girl was only 16 years old. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but tremble slightly. Could he cultivate a young master as his apprentice when he was old? Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing couldn't help but tremble with excitement. He immediately overturned the original road prepared for Su Li. The so-called natural law followed the natural law. Such a talented person should not be bound by him. Instead, she should develop freely according to her thoughts. He only needed to control the direction of Su Li's growth to ensure that she would not go astray. If Su Li couldn't break through the inborn hurdle because of his rules and regulations, then he would have no face to see his master in the afterlife. "My apprentice, how did you practice? I estimated that you could reach the acquired fifth hurdle at most. I never thought that you could reach 3 hurdles more. Did you eat something?" Qi Xianqing collected his thoughts and asked nervously. Although Su Li's foundation was stable, he didn't rule out that she had eaten some evil elixirs. He had to ask clearly. Su Li smiled slightly and said, "Master, come with me." Although the old guy was hypocritical in the previous life and even participated in the martial arts team against her, it was not his fault after all. His selfless contribution in this life was enough for her to pay back. She didn't like to owe others, and she didn't like others to owe her. Some accounts should be settled clearly in advance to avoid trouble later. Indifference flashed in Su Li's eyes. Unfortunately, Qi Xianqing followed her, and there was still a little excitement on his face. He didn't notice it at all. When they came to the room, Su Li asked Mammy Li to leave. Then she took out a piece of unknown dark yellow bast paper from the secret compartment. The surface of the bast paper was slightly ragged, but fortunately, the handwriting was still clear. Qi Xianqing knew at a glance that it was an old thing. Seeing Su Li handed over the scroll, Qi Xianqing was puzzled, but he still took it and spread it out. When his sight fell on the first line, his eyes suddenly became bigger than a copper bell. This was the second half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction that he had been looking for many years. It's really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, but finding it by chance without any effort. Qi Xianqing tightly grasped the scroll with both hands, and his old eyes were slightly moist. Only he knew how many generations they had worked hard for the second half of the Book of Poison. He thought that he would be buried with regret in this life. He never thought that Su Li suddenly gave him such a big surprise. "Girl, where did you get this thing?" Looking at Qi Xianqing's old tears, Su Li smiled slightly and whispered, "In the prisoner camp outside the Qinghe town. I felt the call of the unseen and dug it out from the soil." Prisoner camp, Qi Xianqing sighed with emotion. He didn't expect that the most important book of poison of his sect was hidden in the dirtiest place in the Qinghe town. No wonder he went everywhere, but he couldn't find any clue. That was, Su Li was destined to learn the second half of the Book of Poison. Otherwise, no one knew when the second half of the Book of Poison would appear. Su Li saw that Qi Xianqing's face kept changing. Sometimes he was happy, and sometimes he was sad. A glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. In her previous life, it was all thanks to those prostitutes who bullied and humiliated her that she had obtained the Book of Poison. If they had not pressed her head hard into the soil and almost suffocated her to death, she would not have noticed that the soil had a strange odor. She then dug it out of curiosity, and because of this digging, a terrifying demoness appeared in her previous life. Qi Xianqing had lived for several 60 years. He had extraordinary knowledge and high cultivation. After reading the second half of the Ghost Valley meditation directions several times, he had remembered the whole text. Then he carefully rolled the scroll, took out the piece of human skin, and gently put them in Su Li's hands. "Disciple, you are destined to learn this thing. I naturally can't take it for myself. I am already satisfied to have the honor to witness the completion of the Ghost Valley meditation direction. There are few people in the Ghost Valley. You are my last disciple. You will inherit the Ghost Valley meditation direction in the future. You should take good care of the Ghost Valley meditation direction and its secret method. Don't let it be lost." Su Li was slightly shocked. Although she knew that she was the last disciple of Qi Xianqing, she didn't expect that Qi Xianqing valued her so much. For a long time, she always regarded Qi Xianqing as a convenient shield. In her eyes, the relationship between them was more like a transaction. "If you gave me the first half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction, I would give you the second half. If you gave me the secret method and the disguise skill, I would give you something else in the future. A teacher for a day is a father for a lifetime." Su Li lowered her head and rolled her eyes. There was a touch of sarcasm in her eyes. She didn't expect that Qi Xianqing still maintained such a traditional and simple idea in his heart after living in the martial arts circle for a lifetime. He really regarded her as his own daughter instead of controlling her as a tool to strengthen himself. Seeing that Su Li slowly took over the scroll in her hands, Qi Xianqing smiled knowingly and felt relieved. He came back in a hurry to see whether Su Li was well or not. Now he felt that this girl was so lucky that he didn't need to worry too much about her future. Thinking of this, Qi Xianqing touched Su Li's long black and smooth hair and said kindly, "Disciple, what do you want to do in Yunjing? You can tell me. Maybe I can help a little." Chapter 141. Qi Xianqing heard the words and laughed. He shook his finger and pointed at the tip of Su Li's nose. He said, "Disciple, it is not difficult for your master. Anyway, your master has been an official in the Dahan dynasty for a few years. I know the rules clearly. Let me think about it. I can study and practice at the same time. Without thinking for a long time, Qi Xianqing gave her 2 ways. He said, the first way is that you enter the National Academy and become a student of the Girls' School of Martial Arts of the National Academy. Then you can naturally study and practice at the same time. Besides, there are many seniors in the National Academy. If you encounter difficulties in practice, you can also find help. Su Li immediately shook her head. She had too many secrets. How could she go to the National Academy in such an exposed way? If she was accidentally seen by others, she wouldn't know how she died. It is too ostentatious. I don't like it. Moreover, Master, didn't you say that unless it's necessary, we shouldn't enter the imperial court? If we enter the National Academy, I'm afraid that the day we come out, we'll be forced to join a faction. Qi Xianqing smiled happily when he saw his disciples smile. Su Li could see the situation so clearly. If she entered the officialdom, she would be a rare talent. If Su Li really agreed or hesitated, he would not be at ease to let her go to Yunjing with Su Qingtan. After testing her, he felt more at ease. Since I don't like it, I have a second way. Qi Xianqing smiled like an old liar. He took out an exquisite jade token with a line of small seal characters on the surface and a blank back. Then, he casually took out a dagger and slashed it at the back of the jade tablet. For a moment, jade chips flew everywhere. Su Li was inexplicable. She didn't recognize the origin of the jade token. Although she had been to Yunjing in the previous life, she couldn't get in touch with the things of the National Academy because of her identity. She didn't know the identity represented by the jade token. At this time, Qi Xianqing had stopped carving. He blew off the remaining jade chips on the back of the jade token and put it in Su Li's palm. Su Li looked at it and turned it over. She saw her name and a symbol that she didn't know the meaning engraved on the back. Master, this. Before Su Li spoke, Qi Xianqing raised his hand and interrupted, you carry this jade pendant with you. It can ensure that you are unimpeded in the National Academy, and it won't be too ostentatious. The only thing you need to do is to go to the courtyards next to the National Academy every day. But you can also take the books there to read. It's not a waste of time. Later, Qi Xianqing muttered something, but the words were not clear enough. Su Li didn't hear it clearly. She put away the jade token and felt strange. She always felt that there was something that Qi Xianqing didn't tell her. But it didn't matter. As long as the first 2 sentences of Qi Xianqing were true, everything else didn't matter. After Qi Xianqing sent the jade token, he didn't stay here for a long time and left, saying that he was going to see an old friend. An old and kind figure flashed in front of Su Li. She couldn't help but shake her head. It was a blessing to see an old friend when she lived to the age of Qi Xianqing. After Qi Xianqing left, Su Qingtan, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately came in and asked with concern, what did Mr. Qi say to you? Su Li didn't hide it. She took out the jade token and showed it to Su Qingtan. She hoped that he could speculate the identity of Qi Xianqing. When Su Qingtan saw the jade token, his expression changed slightly. He couldn't help but take it and look at it carefully. After a long time, he raised his head and gave it back to Su Li. He said, it's strange. It's not like the jade token of the National Academy. I once had a jade token and also saw the jade tokens of the teachers of the National Academy. They are different from yours. Su Li's eyes flashed, but she smiled and put away the jade token. She said with a smile, it's not the same. It will be clear when I go to Yunjing. The teacher won't hurt me. Well. Seeing Su Li's bright smile, Su Qingtan looked solemn and sighed in his heart, he won't hurt you. He is your benefactor. It was beyond Su Qingtan's imagination that the teacher could give a jade token and inscribe words on it. He only knew that even the best teacher of the National Academy didn't have the qualification. In another courtyard of the National Academy, a bamboo tea house was specially built. It was ventilated and cool. The plaque was engraved with, "A gentleman is like a bamboo." It was all green. Summer is coming. My tea house is finally put to use again. Haha, Ning Yunji happily tasted the tea that Ning Qing made for him and gently hummed the opera. Ning Qing, who was reading aside, rolled her eyes frequently. Su Li is about to go to Yunjing. Father, everything you have arranged is in vain. Aren't you disappointed at all? Ning Qing couldn't help but ask after putting down the book. Ning Yunji smiled and was about to say something. Suddenly, there was an unusual wind in the tea house. Then he only felt that there was a flash in front of him. There was one more person on the opposite side of the tea table. Who is it? Seeing the old man who appeared like a ghost, Ning Qing got up in shock. She subconsciously wanted to pull out the dagger on her waist. But she heard Ning Yunji shout, "Stop!" She turned around and looked at her father. Her almond-shaped eyes were bigger than walnuts. Her father even knelt and kowtowed to the old man who looked younger than him. Ning Yunji was so excited at the moment that he couldn't control himself. He saluted respectfully and said, "Teacher Qi. I am Ning Yunji. Greetings to you." At the moment, Qi Xianqing didn't smile like an old liar. Instead, he looked solemn and serious. He really looked like a super mundane person. "Qing, come and greet Teacher Qi." Ning Yunji scolded severely. Although Ning Qing was very unwilling, she still knelt down reluctantly and called him Grandmaster Qi. But she thought in her heart that it was not inappropriate for her to kneel down to an old man who was 70 or 80 years old. "Xiaoning, it's rare that you still remember me. I didn't expect that your daughter has grown up so much." Qi Xianqing sighed and smiled kindly. Ning Yunji then relaxed and said half-jokingly, 60 years have passed. If I don't even marry a wife and have children, won't my life be in vain?" Qi Xianqing heard it and immediately laughed. Ning Qing still doubted secretly. Was the old man who suddenly appeared as long-lived as her father said? She felt that Qi Xianqing was younger than her father. Qi Xianqing stopped whispering and took out a brocade box and put it on the table. He sighed and said, "Ning Yunji, you and I are not destined. It's rare that you still care about the old friendship and save the life of my last disciple. This is a thank you gift. You have to accept it." Ning Yunji was terrified in his heart. But he remembered Qi Xianqing's teaching, so he took it with trembling hands. Ning Qing rolled her eyes. A gentleman can be deceived by his integrity. That was what her father meant. This thing can prolong your life for 10 years. There is no disease or pain. I refined it in a circle. Qi Xianqing squinted and said, "Remember not to show it to others. I'm afraid that you will be killed. Now take it quickly. Prolong life for 10 years. Is there such a magical thing in the world?" Ning Yunji heard it with his eyes wide open. He immediately obeyed Qi Xianqing's instruction. He was going to open the brocade box and take the elixir. But before he opened the brocade box was taken away by Ning Qing. "Father, how can there be elixir to prolong life in the world? It's nonsense. Can he bargain with the king of hell? He must be an old liar." "Father, you are confused." Ning Qing looked angry. She offended Qi Xianqing. Ning Yunji trembled with anger. His face was pale. He waved his hand to slap her. Seeing that her father was going to slap her because of Qi Xianqing, Ning Qing was so scared that she shrank and closed her eyes. The pain she imagined didn't appear on her face. She opened her eyes with grievance. She saw that Qi Xianqing grabbed Ning Yunji's hand. "Hee, you don't have to do this." Qi Xianqing let Ning Yunji sit down. He didn't look at Ning Qing. His tone was still calm. "You were like this in the past. If you didn't see something, you would be contemptuous of me like your daughter for the rest of your life." Ning Yunji heard that and remembered some past events. He immediately bowed his head in shame. So, Qi Xianqing said that they were not fated. His daughter was also not fated with Qi Xianqing, father. Ning Qing was so angry that her eyes were red. She felt powerless in her heart. She knew that no matter how she questioned, her father would believe in Qi Xianqing as if he was bewitched. She secretly decided that when Qi Xianqing left, she would immediately destroy the brocade box. She didn't want her father to eat the elixir that she didn't know what it was. Qi Xianqing smiled lightly. He was not angry at all. He said, "I come here just to return a favor. Your favor is repaid. Next, it's your daughter's turn." Then, he looked at Ning Qing. The latter suddenly snorted and turned her head. Ning Yunji was so angry that he almost turned the table. "Junior, sit here. I will do a divination for you." As soon as Ning Yunji heard that Qi Xianqing was going to do a divination for his daughter, he was overjoyed. He immediately held Ning Qing's hand and forced her to sit. Ning Qing was furious in her heart. She stared at Qi Xianqing taking out pieces of tortoiseshell. She wanted to see how this person deceived her father. Qi Xianqing was in a very good mood today because of Su Li. If it happened in the past, he would have already left. How could he still sit here? He was also a little uncomfortable to be suspected by the daughter of a registered disciple. At this moment, he was in a good mood and took out 3 pieces of tortoiseshell. He gently stroked the surface of the tortoiseshell with one hand. Immediately, a dazzling white light flashed through the cracks of the tortoiseshell. Ning Qing stared at it and almost thought that she was dazzled. It's just a small camouflage. There must be some mechanism. The luminous scale powder is hidden in the cracks of the tortoiseshell. Ning Qing thought to herself. However, what happened next made her unable to find any reason to do so. Because the 3 pieces of tortoiseshell suddenly flew up from the table and rotated around her. This, Ning Yunji was also shocked. He just saw that Qi Xianqing controlled a stone and beat away a group of thieves. Ning Qing's eyes were full of light. It seemed that she returned to her childhood and was full of novelty. She had long forgotten how she offended Qi Xianqing before. This kind of means was really, only immortals could do it, right? What her father said was true. Ning Qing couldn't help but feel a sense of regret. What she did just now was really too much, but at this moment, Qi Xianqing shouted softly. The 3 pieces of tortoiseshell immediately flew back to his hand and combined into a perfect one. At the same time, a line of white light appeared on it without any words in the world. Qi Xianqing frowned slightly and couldn't help but look up at Ning Qing. This woman, would she have a relationship with people in the martial arts circle in the future? Grandmaster Qi. Seeing Qi Xianqing frowning and being in a daze, Ning Qing was very nervous. Would she have a disaster in her life? Did Qi Xianqing feel embarrassed? You are born with a bitter life. It's not all your father's fault that your mother died. It's more because of your congenital deficiency and your body is too weak. Qi Xianqing said first. Ning Qing was slightly stunned and then became silent. Of course, she knew that it was not her father's fault, but she couldn't forgive him from the bottom of her heart. Her father made mistakes in those years. Ning Yunji also sighed softly. He did make mistakes in those years. After so many years, he hadn't remarried. On the one hand, it was for Ning Qing. On the other hand, it was because he hadn't let go. As for the future of this girl. Chapter 142. Ning Yunji's face changed slightly, and he was embarrassed. It seemed that Ning Qing's marriage was a taboo that couldn't be mentioned. Ning Qing was stunned. She didn't leave as long as her father mentioned it as before. Instead, she lowered her head and kept silent for a moment. Then she raised her head and said with complexity, "I only know that his name is Hong Jian. 10 years ago, he seemed to disappear suddenly. I can't find him no matter how hard I try. Grandmaster, your divination is magical. Can't you know his whereabouts? Qi Xianqing couldn't help laughing and sighed, little girl, your grandmaster is not an immortal. Looking for a person is like looking for a needle in a haystack. It can't be known by a piece of turtle shell. But I can guarantee that you will meet each other in the future. You just need to let nature take its course. Really? Ning Qing's eyes immediately brightened. Ning Yunji hadn't seen such an excited look for 10 years. For a heartless man. Ning Yunji shook his head. He was old and didn't care so much about his daughter. He only hoped that they could have a good result. What I said is true. But it depends on you whether you will be happy or sad when you meet him. Qi Xianqing smiled, but he sighed in his heart. If it was an ordinary person, he could find him with the seeking person divination. But Hong Jian had an extraordinary origin. In the future, he would have karma with the people around him. Once the divination involved himself, he couldn't see it clearly. I have been alone all my life. Who has karma with me now is only Su Li. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but worry. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but worry. He didn't have much time to live, and he couldn't continue to lose his life. He could only try to create better practicing conditions for Su Li. Early the next morning, a long line of carriages drove out of the Qinghe town. The carriages were full of parcels, which were the property of the Su family in these years. After selling the land of the 2 Baiwei buildings and the silk shop business, Su Huanli had millions of taels of silver for the first time. He was in a very good mood. Looking at the scenery on both sides of the official road, he seemed to experience a rebirth and transformation. The only fly in the ointment was that Su Huanli pulled a long face and heard the screams from time to time in the carriage behind him, which were made by Zhu Yan. An apology alone wouldn't be able to appease the anger in his heart for framing him and putting him in prison. Not to mention that their relationship as husband and wife over the years had long dissipated with the waves of conflict. If it were not for Su Qingtan's persuasion, he would have divorced Zhu Yan. How could he let her go to the capital with him? Ouch! Aya! Zipei, go and talk to your eldest brother. Slow down, slow down. If I go on like this, I will die of pain before I reach Yunjing. Su Zipei, who was serving on the side, immediately got up. She didn't look bored at all. Maybe Zhu Yan's performance in the inn that day made her feel a little guilty. No one knew how long this patience, which was transformed from guilt, would last. Su Qingtan was concerned about Su Li's thoughts. He was also afraid that Zhu Yan would die of pain on the road, so he ordered them to slow down and asked the accompanying mammy to send a cushion. Then Zhu Yan's screams were finally reduced. It was not a big problem for her to reach Yunjing. Ling Qinglan left a lot of confidants. All of them were seniors who reached the acquired 8th hurdle or above. In addition, with the golden signboard of the Supreme Judiciary, the robbers on the road avoided them. Chief, are we really not going to rob them? With one look, I can tell that these people are millionaires. They have a lot of money. Bah! Did your brain grow on the body of a pig? Do you see the sign of the Supreme Judiciary on the carriage? If we rob them today, the Supreme Judiciary will send troops to destroy our nest tomorrow. If you want to rob them, you can do it alone. I still want to live for a few more years. The young robber was dumbfounded when he heard this and immediately shut his mouth. Nothing happened along the way. Under the care of Su Qingtan, Su Li not only had a carriage with Mammy Li, but also separated the luggage from the Su family. Her special position in Su Qingtan's heart was obvious, which made Su Zipei gnash her teeth with hatred. Li Yuelian also felt uncomfortable. But she also saw what happened in the past year. She knew that her son cared about Su Li very much, so she didn't dare to say anything bad about Su Li. For her, no matter what happened to Su Li, he and Qinghao finally had a good life. They would be very comfortable in the future. There was no conflict between her and Su Li, so there was no need to make trouble. In Zhu Yan's screams from time to time, there were more and more people on the desolate official road after 10 days. Su Qingtian finally saw the tower of Yunjing in the distance. The huge outline was like an ancient giant beast. He couldn't help but sigh. They finally arrived at Yunjing. Su Li opened the window and looked at the tower in the distance. She had excellent eyesight and could almost see the 3 golden characters above the gate. Yunjing City. In this life, she finally came. Su Li looked indifferent, but her heart was surging. In this life, the Yunjing City in her eyes would never be a slaughterhouse. Even if it was going to be slaughtered, it would be her. Mom, we are in Yunjing. Good days are coming. Su Zipei excitedly helped Zhu Yan to stand up and let her barely see the outside through the window. Zhu Yan was also excited, but she didn't show it. But she still couldn't help touching Su Zipei's face. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. Although they had already seen the outline of Yunjing City, the carriage team of the Su family drove for 2 hours to reach the tower. Standing at the gate and looking up, Su Huanli's mouth was so big that 2 eggs could be swallowed. He had never seen a city whose wall was dozens of feet high. It was so magnificent and terrible. Standing here, he was like a small ant. A group of bumpkins. The rich childs who lined up in front of the gate sneered. Their voices were so loud that Su Huanli heard them clearly. His ears were red with anger instantly. But here was the capital. He just came here and didn't want to make trouble for his son. After pointing for a long time, he could only say bitterly, "Ignorant boy, I won't argue with you." Seeing that Su Huanli was so timid, the rich child immediately laughed wildly. Even his maids and servants laughed with him. The guards seemed to know the rich child. They didn't come to settle the dispute. Instead, they watched the show aside. It's true that the kind of master is like the kind of dog. Ma Laosan's servant is still so unbearable. Suddenly, a calm male voice sounded behind Su Huanli. The rich child was stunned at first, and then he was angry. He shouted angrily, "Which bastard dares to scold me? Stand out!" Before he finished his words, he saw the door of the carriage behind opened. A person got off. It was Su Qingtian. Seeing the mark on the carriage, the rich child's pupils shrank. When he saw who the person was, his face changed even more. There was a strong fear in his heart. He said slowly, "I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be our Su Qingtian, the nerd Su. Just like a good-for-nothing. I'm really surprised that he could enter the Supreme Judiciary to eat and wait for death." Su Qingtian's reaction was very calm. His experience in the National Academy for more than half a year had taught him how to endure. Ling Qinglan's henchman behind him stood out at this moment and said expressionlessly, "Child Lu, if you slander the imperial court, you will be beheaded." The tone was extremely calm, but it made the rich child change his face suddenly. He was shocked and couldn't restrain himself anymore. He opened his mouth and scolded, "Don't slander me. I have always been loyal to the imperial court. How can I slander it?" Su Qingtian smiled slightly. When he was about to speak, a clear voice like that of an oriole suddenly sounded behind him. "Child Lu just said that my eldest brother could enter the Supreme Judiciary to eat and wait for death. In your eyes, is the Supreme Judiciary an institution for the imperial court officials to eat and wait for death?" While talking, Su Li walked over leisurely. Her light red skirt fluttered like red leaves in autumn. With her delicate and perfect face, she looked gorgeous. In normal times, Child Lu would be shocked by Su Li's beauty. Then he would try his best to please her, but now he was full of panic and trembled slightly. He was really stunned by Su Li's question just now. Slandering the imperial court was really punishable by death. A smell of urine suddenly spread. Su Qingtian frowned and saw a puddle of water at Lu Xing's feet. He couldn't help but shake his head slightly. He was so unbearable. He was just scared and peed directly. Su Li's little face was slightly red. She cleared her throat and quickly turned her head away. Su Qingtan couldn't help but laugh and quickly let her go back to the carriage. Boring. Brother Wang, let's go. Let's go to the city first. Su Qingtan waved his hand to the young man who helped him just now and got on the carriage. The young man glanced at Su Li's carriage with a little surprise and was secretly surprised. He had known that Su Qingtan doted on his second sister very much and often talked about how smart Su Li was. He had thought that Su Li's reputation was flattered by the Qinghe town, but he did not expect that Su Li seemed to have some ability. It was difficult for the factions in the capital to fight openly. They couldn't fight when they met. Naturally, there were many quarrels. He was influenced by Ling Qinglan and naturally learned a lot. He could easily find faults in Lu Xing's words. But Su Li just arrived in the capital, and she could quickly understand the flaws. It was really rare. I was worried that after the Su family entered the city, it would cause some trouble to the second lord, especially Su Li. Now it seems that I worried in vain. An idea flashed through his mind. The young man didn't look at the smiling guard at the gate. He waved his hand and the long carriage team immediately entered the tall city gate. The streets of Yunjing City were extremely spacious. It was enough for 10 carriages to run side by side without crowding. In addition, it was already evening, so there were not many pedestrians on the road. The Su family's motorcade was smooth all the way. They arrived at Su Qingtan's residence in Yunjing City before dark. After instructing the accompanying mammy to pack the luggage, Zhu Yan immediately chose a room to rest. The torment of the past half-month made the wound on her buttocks worsen a lot. Su Qingtan took Su Li, Li Yuelyan and others to walk around. Su Qinghao finally couldn't help but shout, "Brother, this house is so small. It is not half the size of the previous one." Li Yuelyan suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She pulled Su Qinghao's body and scolded him, "How, don't be rude to your brother. Every inch of land in Yunjing City is expensive. How can the Desu town compare with it? Although this house is only half the size of the previous one, in terms of value, the house in our hometown is not as good as this one." "Oh, I know, mother." Su Qingtan obviously didn't listen to her. He said perfunctorily. Then he pulled Su Qingtan and said coquettishly, "Brother, go to the martial arts field with me. You haven't played with me for a long time." Su Qingtan's eyes were helpless, but also doting. He turned back and said with a smile, "Second sister, mother, I have arranged your courtyard. It is as good as father's. I will go to play for a while. If you need anything, you can find Zhu Er." Zhu Er was his personal maid, so he always took her with him. Seeing that the relationship between the two brothers was still the same as before, Li Yuelyan was gratified. She glanced at Su Li and hesitated for a moment. Then she gently held Su Li's slightly cold hand and said softly, "Come on, go to see the courtyard with me." Chapter 143. Su Li was slightly stunned and then nodded with a chuckle. For Li Yuelyan, she was only a stranger in the previous life, because her sense of existence was too weak. Only her poisoning Zhu Yan's son could be called amazing. In the previous life, Zhu Yan and Su Zipei killed Li Yuelyan and made him the scapegoat. Su Qingtan put down his softness and joined the crusade against Li Yuelyan because of his mother's death. He completely became a puppet of Su Zipei. In this life, Zhu Yan and Su Zipei were marginalized in the Su family, but she and Li Yuelyan could go to the new yard hand in hand. Her efforts were not in vain. A faint light flashed in Su Li's eyes. Now she would see what changes the old friends in Yunjing had in this life. It was a silent night. The next morning, the Su family was busy. Su Qingtan went to the morning imperial court before dawn. Su Huanli took the silver everywhere and began to plan the location of the Baiwei building. Li Yuelyan took care of the family chores. "Ma'am." Su Chui was invited by Su Qingtan from the temple. Su Qingtan's attitude was not good enough. She was angry and didn't want to take the power of the family from Li Yuelian. As for Zhu Yan and Su Zipei, they wouldn't dare to seize power from Li Yuelian even if they had the courage. Everyone could see that Su Qingtan had the final say in the Su family. Su Li called a coachman in front of the gate and headed for the National Academy. When the coachman heard the name of the National Academy and saw that Su Li's dress and temperament were extraordinary, he couldn't help but be in awe. He quickly took Su Li through the streets and alleys and arrived before the National Academy started. Su Li actually gave him 1 tael of silver as a thank you gift. The coachman was overjoyed and left with deep gratitude. This scene was seen by the guard at the gate of the National Academy. He couldn't help but secretly sigh that this lady was really generous. 1 tael of silver was enough to support the food expenses of an ordinary family for a month. When the guard was thinking, he saw Su Li coming over. He quickly straightened up, stopped Su Li, and reached out to her. Being generous was one thing, but what needed to be checked still had to be checked. You don't look like someone from the academy. Do you have a token? Hearing the guard's words, Su Li hesitated. Then she took out the token given by Qi Xianqing in the guard's suspicious eyes. As a result, the guard turned it over and over again, his heart filled with a strange feeling. Su Li. Never heard of it. Besides, the National Academy doesn't have this kind of token. Girl, it's a big crime to pretend to be a student of the National Academy. Don't mess around. For the sake of Su Li's beauty, the guard persuaded her kindly. Su Li secretly blamed Qi Xianqing for being unreliable. She had to pretend to be very helpless and said frankly, "Brother, to tell you the truth. This token was given to him by an elder in his family, so it must be real. Big brother, please take a few more looks and let me in." Your family elders? The guard seemed to have heard an extremely funny joke and immediately burst into laughter. Miss, this is the National Academy. The token of the National Academy can't be given by your elders. I have already said that this token is fake. Leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. After that, the guard trembled slightly, and a breath of acquired 6th hurdle diffused from inside to outside. Su Li seemed to be frightened by it. She was so scared that her face turned pale and she stepped back again and again. Seeing this, the guard smiled proudly. He had just broken through to the acquired 6th hurdle and had no place to show off. Today, he showed off his power and prestige. He would tell his mother later. Wait. Show me the token. The old guard standing on the side couldn't bear it. Young people were too aggressive and didn't know how to be cautious. He had to be careful to avoid making a big mistake. The young guard didn't dare to disobey and quickly handed over the jade pendant. This old guy was quite experienced. If he didn't give him face, he might be bullied by him for a few days. The old guard took over the jade pendant and was immediately shocked. It was a good nephrite. He had handled at least 8,000 jade pendants. He immediately recognized the quality of Su Li's jade pendant, which was at the same level as that of the lecturer of the National Academy. In a moment, the old guard's eyes turned from turbid to bright. He carefully identified the jade pendant. The style of the jade pendant was very old. Fortunately, he was the most senior guard. He quickly remembered that this was the unified jade pendant issued by the National Academy 20 years ago. But the words on the back were very new, as if they had just been engraved. The old guard was confused until he saw the 2 words, Su Li, on the back and the very inconspicuous symbol. Hiss. The old guard's face changed greatly. He quickly came over respectfully and glanced at the confused young guard. He bowed to Su Li and said respectfully, "It turns out to be Lecturer Su. I am old and dim-sighted. I didn't recognize the jade pendant in time. Please don't blame me." She was really a lecturer of the National Academy. The young guard's face turned pale when he heard this. He rushed over and knelt down, apologizing repeatedly, "Sir, I'm new here. I was blind and almost made a big mistake. I hope you can forgive me and let me go." The old guard snorted in his heart, but he couldn't bear that the young guard would be sent to be beaten. So, he also pleaded for him. At this moment, other guards who were still watching the scene suddenly saw such a reversal. They didn't dare to come over. They immediately stayed far away and didn't even dare to look at it for fear of getting into trouble. Su Li's eyes flashed and she chuckled. "What are you doing? Please get up. Those who don't know are innocent. I don't mean to blame this young man. It's just that I just came here today. The elders in my family didn't tell me what this token represents. I have to trouble you to explain it." Seeing that Su Li was so easy to talk to, the old guard was relieved. He pressed the young guard's head and saluted several times. Then he let the young guard leave. Then he personally led Su Li into the National Academy. Lecturer Su, the National Academy is the highest school in the entire Dahan country. It is also the place that all the students in the world are most eager to enter. The emperor is wise and far-sighted. He set the National Academy on the west side of the imperial city. It covers an area of thousands of hectares. He also built a national book tower to benefit future generations. The old guard chatted a little and then laughed. "Lecturer Su, with your token, you can go to the National Book Tower. And you are very idle on weekdays. There are not many courses. You are really a talkative person." While Su Li was talking, they had walked to the Vermilion Gate. The gate was closed, and a plaque was hanging crookedly on the door frame. The affiliated school. Su Li was confused. She didn't know the National Academy at all. Seeing that Su Li didn't even know the affiliated school, the old guard had to explain in a low voice, "There are too many officials and nobles in Yunjing City. Playboys are ignorant and incompetent. They can't enter the National Academy. They feel embarrassed. The pressure of the National Academy is also great, so. Then there is the affiliated school." Su Li was suddenly enlightened. She faintly understood why Qi Xianqing hid it. It turned out that he didn't want to keep a secret, but he was embarrassed to say it. In this way, wasn't the affiliated school the gathering place of the playboys in Yunjing City? Su Li's face immediately darkened. The old guard smiled and comforted her. "Miss, don't worry. Since you have the lecturer token of the affiliated school, even if those young masters are powerful, they will never dare to hurt you. This is the rule of the National Academy. Even if it is put in front of the emperor, it is reasonable. It can be said that your elders gave you a protective token and let you come to the National Academy to study at will. There are many examples like this 20 years ago. In recent years, there are few examples. Besides, the style of your token is quite old. So, the new guard doesn't recognize it." Su Li completely understood that Qi Xianqing did do what she asked him to do, and he did it perfectly. The only imperfection was, "Old man, how is the reputation of the lecturer of the affiliated school of the National Academy?" Su Li suddenly asked. The old guard immediately choked and smiled embarrassedly. He didn't dare to answer Su Li's question. "I see." Su Li smiled and didn't embarrass the old guard. She gave the old guard some silver and let him leave. Then, she opened the door of the affiliated school. As soon as she entered the door, she smelled an extremely strong stench. Su Li's eyebrows twitched. She bypassed the stone screen and entered the room. Even though she had a steady mind, she couldn't help but feel cold. There was an unknown yellow substance boiling in a large pot, and a fat man who had fainted from the smoke was tied to the pot. A group of servants were covering their noses and adding firewood under the pot. On both sides of the walls were a group of well-dressed young masters, and there were almost no young ladies in sight. They were pointing at the pot in the middle of the courtyard and chatting in low voices. Su Li's sudden appearance made everyone present stunned. Even the servants who were ordered to stop adding firewood also stopped and stared at Su Li blankly. How could such a beautiful girl appear in the affiliated school? Wow! A girl actually came to the affiliated school. Which family does she come from? Did the sun rise from the west? Which family's miss is so tough that her family can't control her? Why does she have to be sent here? Why is she so unfamiliar? Get out of my way. In the noise, a tall and strong child with a lascivious face pushed away several people who stood in his way. He came over with a smile and said, "Which family does she come from? You are so beautiful. I feel itchy when I see you. Why don't you spend the night with me? I promise that I will let you have a taste of ecstasy. How about it?" As he said, the tall child was about to put his arms around Su Li's slender waist. Many playboys were furious, but they didn't dare to stop him. Such a stunner should fall into the hands of Ma Ling. He likes to abuse girls most. If she falls into his hands, she will be dead. Su Li was full of panic. It seemed that she tripped and fell to the ground, but she cleverly avoided Ma Ling's attack. Looking at Su Li's charming look, Ma Ling was so excited that his whole body was trembling. He said, "Bitch, get over here if you are sensible. Even if you are a student of the National Academy, you can't get out of my palm." Ah! Su Li screamed and closed her eyes. She took out a token in her hand and said, "I am a lecturer of the affiliated school." Quack! Ma Ling quickly stopped his body and stumbled and fell to the ground in fear. His face was pale as a piece of paper. It seemed that Su Li's words were the most horrible story in the world. You actually," Ma Ling stared at the token and saw the mark under the name. He was immediately scared. He didn't even say a harsh word. He quickly ran out of the yard as if he was running for his life. Other people had long been shocked. When they saw Su Li's gaze, they immediately saluted like little babies. Then they quickly left the yard like Ma Ling. They wished that they could have 2 more legs. Is the token so useful? Su Li was stunned for a moment. Then she put away the token and put down the fat man tied to the iron pot. Then she put down the things in the iron pot. She had already distinguished that the things in the iron pot were not the irrigation materials of the farmland, but those childs who had nothing to do after eating and cooking a pile of medicinal materials randomly. They made a smell of excrement, but it was not poisonous. When the temperature was low, the stench would naturally dissipate. But Chapter 144. Tang Lei woke up slowly. Looking at the sky and the sun, he felt cold on his back. It took him a long time to realize that he was not in the clinic, but in the affiliated school. "I'm fine." Tang Lei touched his whole body and felt no pain. Ma Ling and others didn't beat him today. Thinking that he was hung on the iron pot by Ma Ling and almost ate shit, Tang Lei couldn't help but retch. He didn't eat anything this day and only vomited some acid water. But he felt much better. Why are they all gone? Tang Lei got up quickly and touched his big belly, which seemed to be 10 months pregnant. He entered the room with a puzzled look. As soon as he came in, he felt that he was firmly locked by someone. He was scared and immediately left the room. He waved his hand and said, "I'll go now." Su Li shouted in a low voice, "Come back." Tang Lei's feet trembled, but he stopped. He slowly looked back. A face came into his sight, and he immediately became a pervert. Oh my! Whose daughter was she? Why was she more beautiful than Wu Xiuxiu? After this thought flashed in his mind, Tang Lei suddenly realized something. He couldn't help but look back at the familiar stone screen. Was it the affiliated school? There was a girl in the affiliated school, what the hell? After a while, Tang Lei was scared and half of his buttocks leaned against the chair. His eyes didn't leave the jade token on the table. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He should have known why Ma Ling and others ran away. It turned out that there was a new lecturer in the affiliated school. Oh my god! When Tang Lei thought that the beautiful girl sitting in front of him was the legendary lecturer of the affiliated school, he was so scared that he hid in the soil again and didn't dare to show up again. Lecturer! Lecturer Su. Tang Lei forced a smile that he thought was the most respectful. I really didn't do anything wrong. Please forgive me this time. Su Li tilted her head and thought that Tang Lei was a coward. How could he do anything wrong? Tell me, why are you so afraid of the lecturers of the affiliated school? Su Li tapped the table with her fingertips and asked the first question softly. The fat boy immediately widened his eyes, which were smaller than the crack of the door. You don't know? Yes. Su Li smiled and showed her white teeth. Tang Lei was so scared that his pupils became slack and he almost ran away. Su Li was the lecturer of the affiliated school. He felt that Su Li was a tigress who was about to choose people to eat. Lecturer, if I tell you, will you not teach the students today? Tang Lei almost cried. Then he remembered that Su Li knew that the lecturers of the affiliated school didn't have a good reputation. It was because the reputation of the lecturers of the affiliated school was not very good. No, it can be said that he is notorious, especially among the students of the affiliated school. He is no less than Lord Qingong of the Ministry of Penalty. Tang Lei wiped his cold sweat. Seeing that Su Li didn't respond to his words, he continued. More than 20 years ago, there were many lecturers in the affiliated school, and they were all talented students who couldn't even be taught by the National Academy. They could only learn by themselves. But some of them were not powerful enough to frighten playboys. They were often bullied and even tortured by playboys. Then, extremely terrible things happened. 20 years ago, there were many lecturers of the affiliated school. They were so talented that the National Academy couldn't teach them. They could only learn by themselves. But some of them were not powerful enough to scare the playboys. They were often bullied and even tortured by the playboys. Then, something terrible happened. The National Academy suffered a heavy loss. The emperor was furious. Finally, he changed the rules of the affiliated school under the suggestion of the royal preceptor. If there were playboys who bullied the lecturers of the affiliated school, they would be exiled or beheaded. Such rules immediately made the families who had just lost their children angry. They jointly impeached the royal preceptor. The emperor was furious. He killed several arrogant officials. Then he stopped. As soon as the rules were changed, the lecturers of the affiliated school immediately became arrogant. They even bullied the playboys. The playboys were angry but dared not to say anything. They could only bear it. But even so, the number of lecturers of the affiliated school was not much. In recent years, there were only 1 or 2 lecturers, or even none. The emperor was furious. He even hinted that the lecturers of the affiliated school should punish the playboys. It didn't matter if they were disabled. The emperor would bear it for them. Then he gave them very favorable conditions. Under such temptation, another lecturer of the affiliated school finally appeared. He was the disciple of the royal preceptor. He was a young man who seemed to be 25 or 26 years old. The young man seemed to be particularly good at studying punishment. He tortured the playboys in different ways every day. But there were no scars. Sometimes he even let the playboys test poison for him. The whole affiliated school was full of complaints. They complained that they didn't want to go to the National Academy. But those families didn't want to lose face. If they knew that their sons were driven out of the National Academy, they would lose face. They said that they couldn't go home even if they died in the affiliated school. It lasted for 3 years. All the playboys in Yunjing City lived in misery. Every day when they opened their eyes, they thought about how to be tortured by the lecturer. Some people even went crazy. But the young man's medical skills were superb. He soon found that those people pretended to be crazy. Then the punishment was more severe. After several punishment methods became famous, they even aroused the interest of Lord Qin. Lord Qin introduced them into the Ministry of Penalty. Fortunately, the lecturer left Yunjing a year ago. I don't know where he went. There is no lecturer in the affiliated school. The playboys are angry again. As he said, Tang Lei was sad and angry. Only 1 year later, there was a new lecturer in the affiliated school. Oh my God. It was desperate enough to be bullied by Ma Ling and others. Another Su Li. How was he going to let them live? After hearing what Tang Lei said, Su Li was thinking. If she guessed right, the young man that Tang Lei said was probably the disciple of Qi Xianqing and her senior fellow apprentice. Qi Xianqing once mentioned it, but he didn't say the name of this person. The time when this person left coincided with that of Qi Xianqing. They almost left at the same time. It shouldn't be a coincidence. They went to do something together. However, the old guy said that he would arrange a position for me to study peacefully. How could it be low-key? It couldn't be any more high-profile. It seemed that he also intended to let me enter the vision of the Dongfang family and experience more experience under the protection of the Dongfang family. Su Li looked indifferent. Qi Xianqing would never expect that his disciple would be an old monster who lived longer than him. The so-called experience was really boring. However, it was not a bad thing to have such a layer of identity as a cover. At least on the surface, she didn't need to worry that the playboy that Su Zipei used would do something bad to her. Thinking of this, Su Li flicked her fingers. A light green elixir was shot into Tang Lei's mouth. What did you feed me? Tang Lei was frightened. Sure enough, those who could be the lecturers of the affiliated school were not good people. He was obviously well-behaved, but Su Li even fed him poison. In addition to poison, Tang Lei couldn't think of what the green elixir could be. Su Li smiled and said, "How can you misunderstand me like this? I am not like my senior fellow apprentice. I am kind-hearted." Senior fellow apprentice? Tang Lei's scalp was numb. He was a senior fellow apprentice. How could he be kind-hearted? Before he said anything, suddenly there was a violent roar in his stomach. It was like that a train ran over his stomach. His abdomen immediately cramped. My stomach! Tang Lei let out an earth-shattering howl and immediately ran in the direction of the toilet. Su Li watched Tang Lei leave with interest. She clearly knew that there was a hidden poison in his body that was difficult to detect. It was really strange. Such a weak child should not have a strong background. Why did he kill people in such a hidden way? Under this hidden poison, Tang Lei would gradually gain weight. Then his body would have various small problems because of excessive obesity. Finally, he would be fat like a ball. His blood would collapse and he would die painfully. His body would be rotten like mud. It seemed that he died of obesity caused by excessive gluttony. Judging from his obesity, Tang Lei had been taking poison for at least 10 years. There were only a few months left before the onset of the disease. Su Li sat down again. She picked up the brush and dipped it in ink. Then she wrote down a line of words and made some changes. The elixir that she gave to Tang Lei could not detoxify the poison. She just arrived in Yunjing. The things of the Linli building had not been sent over yet. So, she didn't have many elixirs with her. The elixir just now was just a relatively simple detoxification elixir. At most, it could wash away a layer of grease on Tang Lei's body and make him thinner. It could delay the onset of the disease. It's really inconvenient that Fang Yuan and others are not around. Su Li sighed. Fortunately, Qi Xianqing arranged a place for her in the affiliated school. It could be a temporary secret place. Senior fellow apprentice also left a lot of medicinal materials here. Many of them were quite rare. It must be a gift for her junior sister apprentice whom she had never met. After checking the medicine cabinet, Su Li nodded with satisfaction. She said, "It saves some time. The remaining medicinal materials are more than enough to refine 10 furnaces of auxiliary medicine of a higher grade." After the playboy of the affiliated school returned to his family, the news that there was one more lecturer in the affiliated school spread quickly. Even people in the imperial palace heard it. Hearing that the emperor knew it, he immediately laughed loudly and said that the teacher didn't deceive him. Su Li's identity was immediately exposed. She was the youngest apprentice of the royal preceptor, that was, the junior sister apprentice of the emperor. Who dared to hurt her? After many families secretly collected information, they found that the Su family was just a nobody. They just moved here from a remote place. Except that Su Qingtan was involved with the third prince, there was nothing unusual in the family. This kind of ant-like small family actually produced a true phoenix. The families who found the information were really angry and hated Su Li. They couldn't wait to drive Su Li away. But Su Li came suddenly without any sign. Even the emperor didn't know it until Su Li entered the affiliated school. It was too late to stop her. At the same time, in the courtyard of the East House of the Ling General's mansion, the leading rich and powerful family in Yunjing. Ling Li looked at the information he just got. He was expressionless, but his heart was in turmoil. The Su family moved to Yunjing. Was it a coincidence? Or was it Su Li's original intention? Thinking of that night, the girl with a cold expression handed out the Zijin token and left with him. Ling Li felt complicated. Su Qingtan had become his woman. If she knew it, would she be angry? Subconsciously, Ling Li's right hand tightened. The paper was slightly wrinkled. Ling Xian, who served beside him, stared at him and said, "Child, what are you worried about?" According to the information, it was a girl, and she was the apprentice of the royal preceptor. She was not a friend. Why did the child care about a girl so much? Subconsciously, Ling Xian was vigilant. Ling Li frowned slightly. Before he spoke, there was a sudden report from the door, "Child." Child Tang came to visit. It seemed that he was in a hurry. Our servants didn't dare to stop him. He has already arrived at the main hall. As soon as the voice died away, Ling Li in the room immediately showed an evil face. He stretched out his hand and pulled the crown on his head. Then he took 2 steps and collapsed on the wheelchair behind him. Chapter 145. Brotherly. Brotherly. As soon as Ling Xian pushed Ling Li out of the study, she saw Tang Lei, who was aggrieved like a little wife, rushed to the wheelchair. From a distance, it was like a meatball in clothes was rolling to the wheelchair and was going to crush it. Ling Li didn't panic at all. He picked his nose with disgust. Then he saw Tang Lei kneeling down in front of him skillfully. 2 fat and greasy hands slapped on Ling Li's legs. Tang Lei cried with tears and snot, "Brotherly, you have to seek justice for me." Ling Li raised his eyebrows and lazily asked, "What? What did the bastard of the Ma family do to you again?" He sighed in his heart that Tang Lei was too weak. He watched him being bullied since childhood. Tang Lei, the eldest son of the Grand Commandant's mansion, didn't say anything and didn't dare to tell the elders of the family. However, he could understand it. After all, the old guy in the Tang's mansion always favored a smarter little bastard. Fatty Tang was the eldest son, but his status in the family was very low. The old Grand Commandant was afraid that people would gossip about him because he was the eldest son. So, he sent Fatty Tang to the affiliated school to save face. If Fatty Tang said it, he would be beaten again. No one would vent his anger for him. Sometimes when Ling Li was bored, he would help Tang Lei to teach Ma Ling and others a lesson. Fatty Tang admired Ling Li very much and regarded him as the boss. If Ling Li mentioned Ma Ling in normal times, Tang Lei would show an angry expression, but he didn't this time. Tang Lei stood up with a sad face and patted his belly, "Brotherly, can't you see anything?" Ling Li rolled his eyes and scolded, "I'm not a rabbit, and I'm not blind. I don't want to see your lard." As he spoke, he waved his hand. Whether it was his expression or his tone, he was the living embodiment of a spoiled hedonistic son of a rich family. Tang Lei was more aggrieved when he heard that. He shook his belly and said, "Brotherly, look. I've really lost a lot of weight. In the past, I could still feel it when I shook my stomach, but now the meat has become solid." The meat that I ate with my own ability is gone just like that. Hearing the fat man's repeated emphasis, Ling Li finally glanced at Tang Lei impatiently. But this glance made him slightly serious, and a chill rose in his heart. Tang Lei was indeed thin, and abnormally thin. He had just seen Tang Lei yesterday, but he had lost at least 15 kilograms of meat today, which was too abnormal. Seeing that Ling Li was a little more serious, Tang Lei finally felt that he found an outlet to vent. He knelt down and hugged Ling Li's legs, crying loudly, "It's all because of Su Li, the lecturer of the affiliated school. She gave me poison when we met. It's so cruel. Brother Li, you have to help me." Tang Lei cried so hard that his tears and snot were all wiped on Ling Li's clothes. The scene was so beautiful that Ling Xian couldn't help but turn her back quietly to let her eyes suffer less. Ling Li was shocked when he heard it. Su Li. Su Li. She did it so quickly, and it was even to the fat man. He had already understood Su Li's poison. Of course, he admired Su Li's medical skills more. There were few people in the world who could make his mood fluctuate, but Su Li was the one who made him worried and couldn't sleep for several days. "Fat man, tell me, how did Su Li torture you?" Ling Li couldn't help but ask. Even he didn't realize that when he asked this question, he couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth. It seemed that it was a pleasant thing to be in the same city with Su Li. Tang Lei only thought that Ling Li was laughing at him. But facing Ling Li, who only regarded him as a friend, he was not angry. Instead, he talked about the details of his encounter with Su Li. First, she asked about the lecturer of the affiliated school, and then she gave you a green poison pill? Ling Li touched his chin and was lost in thought. He didn't get along with Su Li for a long time, but he also knew that the woman would not poison people for no reason. Instead, she was extremely principled. Since Tang Lei helped her solve her doubts, she should give him the corresponding reward. Why did she give him a laxative? Seeing that Ling Li worried about him, Tang Lei was moved. He couldn't help but interrupt, "Brother Li, I feel much better after telling you. It's better to forget it. Although I lost weight after taking the laxative, I also feel much lighter. I'm not as heavy as before. If things get serious, you can't control Su Li. At that time, even old lady can't protect you," Tang Lei said. He was more and more worried that Ling Li would do something absurd again. Ling Li was the first playboy in Yunjing for a reason. One of the most famous things was that he almost tarnished Wu Xiuxiu, the daughter of the Wu family. That thing was so serious that the Ling family and the Wu family almost used troops because of it. Finally, it was settled by the emperor. It was a big crime to tarnish a person's innocence. But, the Ling family fought for the Dahan country for generations. There were countless casualties. Now there were only two boys, Ling Ping and Ling Li. Ling Li was poisoned in his childhood and his legs were disabled. Then, he abandoned himself to despair and gradually became a playboy. The emperor was furious at that time. He ordered the supreme judiciary to find the murderer. But after so many years, the supreme judiciary still couldn't find the whereabouts of the murderer. In this regard, the emperor felt guilty for Ling Li. If he hadn't been poisoned, Ling Li should have become a good soldier in the army like his brother Ling Ping. Therefore, even if Ling Li made a terrible mistake, the emperor finally turned a blind eye and didn't punish him. Ling Li seemed to be scared and restrained a lot. He even went to his favorite brothel less often. At that time, Mrs. Gu felt gratified. But it didn't take long for Ling Li to return to his old ways. He ate, drank, gambled, and played with a group of playboys all day long. Mrs. Gu was so angry that she stayed in bed for half a month. Finally, she completely gave up on Ling Li and let him be. But for the face of the Ling family, she still sent him to the affiliated school. However, as the #1 playboy in Yunjing City, he couldn't be restricted by the affiliated school. He could go to the affiliated school if he wanted to, and he didn't have to go if he didn't want to. He was not restrained like other playboys. Tang Lei couldn't help admiring Ling Li when he thought of the glorious deeds of Ling Li in these years. Brother Li was really a role model of our generation. You said that your body was relaxed after you took the elixir. Ling Li ignored the latter half of Tang Lei's words and said with a smile on his face, "Fatty, I think that the elixir that Su Li gave you was not poison, but to help you recuperate. You are too fat and weak. Now it seems that you are in good health. I think it must be the elixir that Su Li gave you. You should blame her wrongly. You shouldn't." Tang Lei thought that Ling Li would say a few words of loyalty. Unexpectedly, he flattered Su Li in a twinkling of an eye. Tang Lei wanted to cry but had no tears. But to be honest, after listening to Ling Li's words, he really felt that Su Li was different from the previous cold-faced young lecturer. Thinking of this, he touched his round head and said with a silly smile, "It seems that I misunderstood her." But seriously. Tang Lei came over and his small eyes were shining. He said, "Su Li is really beautiful. She is even more beautiful than Wu Xiuxiu. Brother Li, don't you boast that you have seen all the beauties in the world? I didn't expect that I would surpass you one day." Tang Lei showed an expression of, "You didn't expect it." Ling Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If he said that he not only knew Su Li but also slept in her bed for a month, would he go crazy? Thinking of this, Ling Li didn't find that he had a little complacency. But Ling Xian noticed that the master seemed to care about the girl named Su Li very much. After drinking tea in the yard, Tang Lei left with a happy face. His mood had become bright. Because of Ling Li, even if he was bullied by Ma Ling and others every day, he didn't feel desperate. After Tang Lei left, the happy atmosphere in the yard was swept away and replaced by seriousness. Ling Li's smile slowly disappeared. He got up from the wheelchair and went back to the room without saying a word. The whole Yunjing city seemed to be calm, but the undercurrent was turbulent. The emperor was old and had many princes. The position of the crown prince had not been determined yet. A bloody storm was inevitable. This was an internal trouble. The Nanjiang country quelled the internal strife, and the radical royal family gained the upper hand. After the reorganization, there would inevitably be a war, and the Dahan country would be the first to bear the brunt. This was an external trouble. In Yunjing City, there were many people in the martial arts circle. Because a treasure of the martial arts circle would be auctioned in Yunjing City. Many people would die before and after the auction. At this time, Su Li's family suddenly moved to Yunjing. Ling Li couldn't help but bow his head and frown. It was really a headache. After Su Li sorted out the things left by the senior fellow apprentice in the affiliated school, she closed the door and went to the National Book Tower. She was now in the dark and urgently needed to know the families in Yunjing City and the royal family of the Dahan country. When she went there, it was almost dark. Su Li didn't stay for a long time, and the National Book Tower was closed. She only read less than half of the information of Yunjing City, but she knew the general situation. There were so many first-grade officials. The families behind them were naturally the real rich and powerful families in Yunjing City. First, General Ling's mansion where Ms. Gu lived. Although Ms. Gu no longer served in the imperial court, she was a legendary figure in the Dahan country. Naturally, she couldn't be treated as an ordinary person. Second, the Ma family in the right prime minister's mansion. Third, the Tang family in the left prime minister's mansion. Fourth, the Wu family in the general's mansion. Both of them were first-grade officials and had great power in the imperial court. They were from the same rich and powerful families. Their status was no less than the royal family. Then there were the Ma family in the censorate and so on. The introduction was not detailed. Su Li roughly read it. In the night, she disguised herself and went to the Tianya house. Then she knew the overall situation. When she saw the description of Ling Li's file in the Tianya house, she couldn't help but feel strange. It turned out that he had been pretending to be disabled. Did he become disabled after he was seen through in the previous life? Seeing all kinds of absurd things that Ling Li had done over the years to deceive people, Su Li couldn't imagine what kind of mood such a gentleman had to ruin his reputation. After laughing, Su Li's eyes became clear again. She knew Ling Li's intention at a glance. He is really smart. Although the Ling family lost its halo, it was still in danger because of its great achievements. The men of the Ling family died in the battlefield one after another. It was quite strange. Ling Li deliberately showed weakness, but in fact, he wanted to protect himself. The emperor's family was the most ruthless. No one knew how the emperor remembered General Ling and how he was afraid of the Ling family. Thinking of this, Su Li put Ling Li's file aside and began to understand the complex situation in Yunjing carefully. At the same time, an unknown person bought a lot of intelligence of Yunjing city from the Tianya house, especially the intelligence of the Ling family. The news came to Ling Li's yard. "Master, there hasn't been anyone to investigate your file for a long time. Did someone find out your real identity?" Ling Xian read the note and couldn't help but ask with worry. Ling Li took the note with 2 fingers and put it on the candle to burn it into ashes. He didn't answer Ling Xian's question. Instead, he sat back in his seat and smiled deeply. He said that he would break the predestined relationship with Ling Li, but why did he show his scroll? Chapter 146. Su Qingtan followed Ling Qinglan to run around in the past 2 days. He was very busy. When he was free, he knew that Su Li became the legendary lecturer of the affiliated school. And Qi Xianqing used to be the royal preceptor. Even though Su Qingtan had tried his best to guess the identity of Qi Xianqing, he was still shocked by the word royal preceptor. At the same time, he was happy for Su Li. With the protection of the identity of the lecturer of the affiliated school, he didn't need to worry that his second sister would be bullied after he left Yunjing. "There is nothing to do today. You can go back and prepare." After changing his official uniform, Su Qingtan came to the Supreme Judiciary. He found that Ling Qinglan wore casual clothes and smiled lightly. "Prepare for what?" Su Qingtan was confused. "I forgot to tell you that today is the day that General Ling Ping returns to the imperial court. General Ling repelled the army of the Nanjiang country and made great achievements. The emperor is going to hold a banquet for him tonight. This is a good opportunity for you to get to know Lord Qingong. Don't miss it." Ling Qinglan reminded him carefully. He knew that the person Su Qingtan admired was the cruel official who was incorruptible all his life. So, he deliberately took it out and said, "Tonight, there will be a lot of daughters of noble families. You are old enough to get married. Why don't you go and have a look?" Su Qingtan rolled his eyes and thought, "You are 4 years older than me. Why don't I see you get married and have children?" However, when he heard that Lord Qingong would go, Su Qingtan also wanted to go and have a look. He also asked Su Li to go and see the world. If Su Li went to that occasion with her current identity, she would not be looked down upon. Seeing Ling Qinglan humming an unknown tune and leaving, Su Qingtan felt strange. It was obvious that young General Ling Ping won the war. Why was Ling Qinglan so happy as if he won the war? He really didn't understand. Near noon, the returning troops finally appeared at the gate of the city. Ling Ping, who was wearing armor, was on the horse in the front. He looked cold and solemn. As soon as he entered the city, people in Yunjing city cheered enthusiastically. "General Ling, welcome back with victory. General Ling. General Ling," the enthusiastic people came to the ground one after another. Their cheers were like waves. The soldiers who entered the city were excited and their eyes were wet. It seemed that their sweat and blood on the battlefield were answered. Ling Ping was expressionless, and his heart was also as calm as water, even a little angry. Ever since he had taken command of the army, he had always been victorious and had never suffered a defeat. Some people even said that he was the reincarnation of his grandfather, a natural-born god of war. But only he himself knew that every time he won, he would win in an inexplicable manner. Sometimes, even though he had clearly lost, he would wake up the next day to find that the enemy was suddenly unable to withstand a single blow. It was the same this time. He was clearly no match for the army of Nanjiang country because the difference in number was too big. But on the second day, the enemy was poisoned and had no strength. They were defeated by the small army led by him and had to retreat. It was fine if it happened once or twice, but he had been in the army for several years and fought no less than dozens of battles. Every time, he felt as if he was being helped by God. This made him understand that there was an extremely powerful unknown force secretly helping him. But now, the Ling family was alone. They had no allies, and their relationship with the Wu family was like fire and water. He had been ambushed many times in the army, all by the hands of the Wu family. In the end, he had been rescued, but he had never seen the face of the person who had saved him. He didn't even know if the person was a man or a woman. This matter had always been a secret in Ling Ping's heart. He didn't even tell his mother and grandmother. "Madam, old madam. Second master is back. Second master is back." When he was thinking, Ling Ping's horse had stopped at the gate of the Ling house. At this moment, the Ling house was decorated with lanterns and streamers. When the servant waiting in front of the door saw Ling Ping, he immediately shouted with joy and reported inside. Ling Ping hadn't been home for more than half a year. He couldn't stop the excitement in his eyes. He took off his helmet and threw it to the adjutant. Then he quickly entered the house. After a few steps, he saw his mother walking quickly with the help of his grandmother. Both of them were happy and excited. "Mother! Grandma!" Ling Ping shouted. He strode over and knelt down. He said, "I didn't let father and grandfather down. I came back with a great victory. Good boy, get up." Mrs. Gu burst into tears and held Ling Ping tightly. Qiu Meng also wiped her tears. There were only 2 males left in the family, and one was disabled. Ling Ping went to the battlefield. God knew how worried they were. "Ping, you must be very tired. Go in to take a bath, change clothes, and have a rest. Mother and I are here. It's not too late to talk after you have a good rest." Qiu Meng wiped the dust on Ling Ping's face. She looked distressed and said, "My poor son. He is only 20 years old, but he has to shoulder the heavy burden of the Ling family." "Mother, I am not tired." Ling Ping felt the care of his close relatives. It seemed that the tiredness on the road was swept away. He smiled warmly and said, "I haven't entered the imperial palace to meet the emperor. When I come back, I will talk with you about the family. By the way, where is Brother Li? Why didn't I see him?" Mrs. Gu's face darkened. She hit the ground with her crutch and said, "That little bastard went out with the little fatty of the Tang family in the morning. I haven't seen him yet. He is getting more and more outrageous. Since you, as his brother, have returned, you should properly discipline him." Ling Ping heard the words and smiled. He didn't feel disappointed. He said, "It's good that Brother Li is happy. As long as he doesn't do evil things, I can't blame him. It is a blessing for him to spend his life in peace." Mrs. Gu was helpless. The 2 brothers had a good relationship since childhood. Now Ling Ping grew up and had his own ideas. She couldn't control him. After taking a bath and changing clothes, Ling Ping changed into official clothes and went to the imperial palace in a sedan chair. He had received the routine rewards many times. He was excited at the beginning, but now he was calm. The emperor seemed to see that Ling Ping was tired. He laughed and let him go. He only told him to attend the banquet at the waterside pavilion in the south of the city in the evening. Grandma, be gentle. Your grandson's ears are going to fall off." Back to the Ling mansion, Ling Ping finally heard Ling Li's familiar and exaggerated voice. Seeing that the boy was pulled by his grandma and howled, he couldn't help but laugh. He walked over and said, "Grandma, if you don't let go, Brother Li's ears will fall off." Mrs. Gu was so angry that she snorted and put down Ling Li. She pointed at him and scolded, "Look at your brother. He went to the brothel at the age of 16. He smelled of rouge. Why did the Ling family have such a little bastard like you? I'm so angry." Ling Ping understood that when he entered the imperial palace, Grandma specially sent someone to find Ling Li. Finally, she found him in the brothel alley. "Grandma, don't scold him. I will teach him a lesson." Ling Ping pushed the wheelchair and took Ling Li away quickly. Mrs. Gu was so angry that she jumped. "Ha ha 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 ha, second brother, you didn't see the top courtesan of the Hongyan house. She is so beautiful. I will take you to see her later." In the yard, Ling Ping saw Ling Xian put down the wine and dishes and stepped back to leave. He was amazed. He didn't expect that the girl became so beautiful after half a year. It was really hard for her to follow his second brother. Ling Ping straightened Ling Li's hair crown. As before, he knocked on Ling Li's knee and asked softly, still no response. Ling Li shook his head indifferently and said lazily, "Second brother, it has been so many years. Don't you find it annoying that you are still doing this?" Ling Ping's breath trembled slightly. He smiled bitterly and said, "I can't change my old habit. Perhaps your second brother's knocking will really be heard by the heavens and allow you to recover." Ling Li's eyes flashed with a vague light, but he said in a flirtatious way, "God has eyes? Why didn't I see it? If it really has eyes, will the Ling family be like this?" Ling Ping was speechless and only smiled bitterly. They were silent for a moment. Ling Ping suddenly said, "I will take you to the banquet in the evening. You are not young anymore. It's time." "Don't." Ling Li immediately interrupted and said, "It is the blind date arranged by the emperor for you. Why should I take part in it? Besides, I want to be happy for a few years. Let's talk about marrying a wife later. You can see it clearly." Ling Ping smiled. It was said that his brother was a playboy. Not only his legs were disabled, but also his brain was not good. He often made trouble for the Ling mansion. Only when he talked and laughed with his second brother could he find that his second brother was not really a playboy. But he was disabled. It seemed that he had no other choice but to be a playboy. The Ling family had been generals for generations. If his second brother became a scholar, it was undoubtedly an insult. "But second brother, I heard from Fatty Tang that the girl named Su Li is very beautiful. You must leave him for me, your younger brother. If any other lackeys fancy him, you must let me know." Ling Li said and giggled. It seemed that he thought of some extremely beautiful things. Ling Ping couldn't help but shake his head and laugh, "I just came back. You want to make trouble for me? I heard that Su Li has an extraordinary background. Don't be like Wu Xiuxiu. Otherwise, no matter how much I love you, I will never help you this time." Ling Li shrank his neck and smiled embarrassedly, "I know, second brother. I don't dare to do that. I was really scared at that time. In fact, I didn't intend to touch Wu Xiuxiu. Wu Xiuxiu automatically got into my arms. Alas. I have said this many times. You don't believe me. Forget it." Ling Li waved his hand with flagging interest and let Ling Ping leave. Ling Ping shook his head slightly and left the yard. This silly boy. Of course he believed him. His second brother was not a fool. How could he not know the consequences of insulting Wu Xiuxiu? It was just that his second brother's image of a debauchee was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. He could only suffer in silence. In order to deal with the Ling family, the Wu family has been doing everything. They can even sacrifice the reputation of their daughter. Ling Ping sneered several times. Ling Ping sneered several times. The Wu family would come back tonight. He wanted to see what new tricks they had. In the yard, the smile on Ling Li's face gradually faded. When Ling Xian confirmed that Ling Ping had left, he stood up from the wheelchair and returned to the study. At this moment, Ling Mo, dressed in black, was sitting quietly in the room. He closed his eyes and breathed faintly. Ling Ping was talking and laughing with Ling Li in the yard and didn't find him. Noticing that Ling Li came in, Ling Mo opened his eyes and stood up. He respectfully reported, "Qinglan's information is good. I took people to destroy the small stronghold of the Yanshi cult and seized a large number of bone-softening powder. I scattered it to the army of the Nanjiang country and helped Ling Ping turn defeat into victory. Second brother has doubts in these years. He has been silent all the time. It's really hard for him." Ling Li took Ling Mo's handwritten letter and read it. He couldn't help but laugh. Qinglan is actually a hands-off shopkeeper. Does he really want to train Su Qingtan as his successor? Ling Mo hesitated and asked, "His injury?" Ling Li snorted and said, "Something must have gone wrong. He still refuses to tell me. He thinks that his life belongs to himself. Is he ready to quit?" Ling Mo's face tightened and he said, "Master, you're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."